And now we're going to start Chapter 6, which Chapter 6 is really, in a way, a continuation of Chapter 5.
Right.
It's, although it's not really the two inyanim of Chochmah and Bina, it's within each one of Bina and Chochmah, there's the Priya and the Chedva. Let me open the book here. והנה ידוע מיימר דבחייה תקיעה בליבוי מסitra da, וחדווה מסitra da. From one side is crying, from one side is happiness. ליהי שצריך להקדם בחינת החונה בנפש לכלולוס ידיע לכיס בהשתלשלות העיר אינסוף בביאה, there has to be this achana. עד שתהיה הנפש בחינת כלי מוכן. That means if you don't have this achana, you're not a kli mukhan. And by the way, in our days, like according to what the Rebbe says, we can really do this L'Katchila river thing. When you start studying, the hachana will come on its own. And that's in general, even the Indian of Avodas HaMoichin. B'zeh eina ela al dem tzos bedvar malalu, b'chia v'chedva. Gam shem beis hafochem. The two opposites, same like before, the simcha and the bittul is two opposites.
Right.
These are also two opposites. Hare boim ke'echad mamish, but they have to come simultaneously. Means boinunus achas davka. In each is boinunus, they should immediately come together.
Right.
ובזה נעשה דווקא בחינת החון הרבה בנפש לקבוע בעצמי שלה מכל הסוגות פרטי זה אינסוף בביאה. ואם יחסר אחד מאלה, דהיינו זה ולא זה. I mean, if he has tchiyah without simcha, or simcha without tchiyah. או גם שנדמה לו שיש בליבו משתיים, אבל אינם למיתוסם לא אימכם בנפש כלל. Meaning it's just not a deep thing. Rak derech ma'avir chetzainis ba'alma. Only an external thing that just like ba'alma means, like just not actually a deep thing.
Right.
Hariz siman gomor shalon nikba benafsho klum. It means you really nothing went into him. The Chassidus didn't go into him. Rak marachik ma'ed. He only has it in a very far away way. Kulu v'kim'at
Bima'at.
Oh yeah, ubim'at davar hamenagid, with a little bit of something going against it. More betir d'gdoilo, like it will have a lot of busyness. Like we do with his business or with whatever,
Right.
Or behargoshes atzmo leyesh b'yoser, or by feeling himself to a real something. Yinatik melibo legamre. The whole thing will be totally separated away from him. Ovir advarim, hine yadua, the einig v'simcha, u b'chochma bina. Ha'einig b'chochma, v'simcha b'bina. V'zeu ha'efesh ben Shabbos li'yentav ki yadua. The Shabbos is einig, it says einig Shabbos, and the yentav is samachta b'chagecha. Ki ha'asoga b'seichel, meilid ha'simcha, shahu simchas ha'nefesh, like what we said before, that the main thing of the simcha is dafka in the lakus, means not in the explanation. If the simcha is into the explanation, that's not the real simcha.
Right.
They will be happy dafka by you. Which is very strange, by the way. How is that possible? Because the simcha of Bina is into the musag. The whole thing of Bina is that it's not into the etzem hadover.
Right.
But it's dafka into the explanation. But it makes no difference. The simcha is dafka from the etzem hadover. So that even when you hear about something, like, for instance, when you hear that something happened that makes you happy, it's not the explanation that makes you happy, it's the etzem hadover.
Right.
Like if you hear that the Steelers won,
Right.
And the guy tells you, and then he ran and he went to the tent and he went to the fifth, then it was a thing, and it was like you hear it on the radio or something like that. And you're hearing basically from far away. But what you're happy about is about the etzem hadavar, not about the fact that you're hearing the explanation.
Right.
But the fact that the guy made the goal.
Right.
So the same thing over here, that even though you're hearing just an explanation, the actual simcha comes from the etzem hadavar, from the actual elokus. Not only that, the whole inyan of bina, that even though bina is into an explanation, the whole inyan of bina is that you want to understand the actual thing.
Right.
Even though you're understanding an explanation, but the rotzen of bina, means kesser of bina, is dafka into the actual thing. And that's one of the reasons why bina has no upper limit. Also has no lower limit. Like there's certain of the midos, actually none of the midos really have an upper or lower limit, but in a way they do, whereas bina does not. And not only that, bina can go up with no limits into both up and down in a way of a yesh.
Right.
That the thing of bina, we see even in terms of like in terms of down, that when bina goes into the physical reality, it goes into it in a way of a yesh, till we actually have things like cars and computers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's from the bina. Whereas from chokhmah, it doesn't necessarily go in a way of a yesh, because chokhmah is a thing of an ain. And it won't necessarily give you a way to do actual yesh things in the physical reality, whereas bina does. The analysis of science is what, science is the main thing of the scientific method. Science, and people think science is a philosophy. It's really a method. It's a methodology.
Right.
Which the methodology of science basically is actually Ian.
Right.
You make a theory, a svara, then you test it. Just like that's what they do in Talmud. They make a svara. They say maybe it's like this. So how would that apply to that thing? If let's say I have this svara, and then they say, wait, it seems to work, and then the other guy says, no, look at this.
Right.
And he blows up your svara.
Right.
So the same thing with science. You come up with a theory, and then you try to test it against the actual facts of reality and see if things work really according to your theory. That's what a scientific experiment is. Scientific experiment is you build up a set of things that will test your theory against the actual facts.
Right.
So that whole thing, really, the scientific method is a thing of Ian. It's a thing of analysis.
Right.
And that's basically the scientific theory is one of the expressions of the eighth king of Tohu. Basically, it's a bina of Tohu. It's a bina which is unconnected to God.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bina which is unconnected to God, and yet, like they said, the eighth king doesn't die. And we see that really the scientists themselves, even though they started off in the 19th century, they were very full of themselves as far as how they disproved that there's a God and stuff like that. But now the more they get into it, the more they see that there seems to be a controller of the universe.
Right.
But the basic thing is that the bina is into the actual thing. Like you see that, like the bina into the physical world is into the actual thing.
Right.
And the same thing, like right now, we are just hearing a bunch of explanations. But what we're trying to understand is we're not even really trying to understand how the world came into being, actually.
Right.
That's not really what we're trying to understand. That's also a mashal. What we're really trying to understand is what God is. and what we're doing here. That's what Chassidus is about. Okay. We're Yismucho Bach Davka. Olafia now the Basaga late Machshava Tfise Bey. According to what we said in the last chapter, that the Machshava of Bina actually does not catch him. Adraba Mufla Ba'aflos Ha'erech HaNivdal Chulu. Davka, the thing is very totally separated in a totally wondrous thing, that you see it as a totally wondrous thing that does not make any sense at all. Ba'aflos ha'erech, and not just that it's wondrous according to our erech, but it's like totally non-comparative to anything we can think of.
Right.
Anidal chulu. V'aynu b'chinas koach ma the chochma behelam kanal. And this is davka in the koach ma of the chochma that sees while you're understanding into the bina. It's not just that. What he's explaining here is that it's not just that when you look into the bina itself is also mechayev that there are some details are missing here.
Right.
But there's more than that comes out of it. There's an actual thing that comes out of the koach chochma that you can actually see that there's a wondrous thing, a fantastically wondrous thing that the bina is not describing.
Right.
And that is coming from the koach ma, which comes dafka from the overview of the whole thing. When you take in the overview of the whole thing, you see that all the particulars are missing something.
Right.
And not only just that you see that it's missing, but you actually have a sight of it, like in the koach chochma, which is the koach ma that you see, in other words, that you see into the actual mahus of the thing, that the mahus of this thing is totally nivdal from what the explanation is talking about.
Right.
This is coming from the koach chochma. Yeah?
Is it in the way of a shlila?
No, the way of a shlila is in bina. You know, there's deductive logic, inductive logic, and another kind of logic.
Okay, but so the hasaga of bina into the thing is in a way of a shlila, but the hasaga or the re'iyah of chokhmah is mamash like a re'iyah of the thing.
Is a positive thing.
Right.
That you see, it comes from the shlila of bina. The bina, in other words, the power of chokhmah is awakened from the power of bina. And where is it awakened from? From the shlila. That, in other words, in bina, like there's deductive logic that basically says this, therefore that.
Right.
You bring up various pratim, and therefore you can come up with a conclusion.
Right.
And that's basically hasagas, not of shlila, of the actual, what the conclusion is.
Right.
Hasagas hashlila is like, for instance, like if there's 20 people in the room, and one of them has got a red ball in his pocket. And we know that.
Mm-hmm.
And we check 19 people, and they don't have a red ball in their pocket. Okay,
Right.
now this is almost like deductive logic. It's not a real shlila, but it's still, that's the beginning of the explanation of what hasagas hashlila is. You don't really know that he has a red ball in his pocket, because you didn't look in his pocket. But it must be him, because it's not them.
Right.
So the same thing, like, for instance, like, who's controlling your stomach? You know that it's not you, because sometimes your stomach goes out of control and you can't put it into control.
Right.
Like, for instance, if you're all full, and then somebody brings a fantastic dish that you love, and you want to make yourself hungry, you can't do that.
Right.
You have nothing to do with your stomach. So you have to say that it must be God who controls my stomach.
Right.
But you don't actually have a hasoga exactly how God controls your stomach. That's hasoga sashlila. And in general, hasoga sashlila is just machayev when you look around. Like, for instance, when you look around that you come into a palace.
Right.
This is one of the mashalim they give on that there must be a creator to the world. If you come, you look into a palace, and there's a whole bunch of things there with food in the refrigerator. You can't say, wow, I wonder how this palace came here out of nothingness in the middle of the forest. I wonder how many billions of years it took till the stones fell into the shape of a palace.
Right.
I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You have to say that there's somebody's palace.
Right.
There's a balabaya to this bira.
Right.
There has to be a balabaya to this bira, but you don't see the balabas.
Right.
That's in a way hasogas hashlila. That's the first level of hasogas hashlila. Then another level of hasogas hashlila is, and this is the real thing of hasogas hashlila, is that you can't figure out what the thing is, but you can figure out what it isn't.
Right. That's what the Rambam talks about.
That's the real thing of hasogas hashlila, because the first thing, even though it's hasogas hashlila, it's really deductive logic. It's this, therefore that, because if you know for sure, in other words, if you don't know for sure that somebody really has the ball, then you don't know for sure that the 20th guy has the ball in his pocket. But if I tell you for sure one of them has a ball in his pocket,
right.
So you can't really figure out what the Eibishter is, but you can figure out it's not Jesus. It's not a person.
Right.
So what is it? If you know so good, so what is it? You say, well, you can't. What it is, the actual mahus, you can't figure out. But I can tell you what it's not.
Right.
That's the real thing of hasogas hashlila. But that's a hasoga. That's not in chokhmah. That's an actual form of logic.
Right.
That you can actually figure out what the thing is not.
Right.
Okay, but when you can figure out what the thing is not, and you figure out that it's not anything physical, and it's not anything like you can think of, and it's not necessarily with transferos.
Right.
So that it's not necessarily love me kol ilan midas klal. You see, it starts with the word love.
Right.
Means it's hasogas hashlila. So what is it? This is, well, it's not chokhmah. It's not bina. It's not any of them.
Right.
And not only it's not any of them in terms of our spheros, but even in terms of the spheros that we can have a hasoga only with a marshal into. It's not even them.
Right.
Okay, now, up to here, we're still talking logic. This is all bina. It's not chokhmah.
Right.
This awakens the power of chokhmah to actually see into the mahus of what it is.
Right.
And what it sees in the mahus, it doesn't see really what it is so much. It just sees how far away it is removed.
Right.
So that basically it's like a thing, when you're walking towards a big, big mountain, and it looks to you like it's a big mountain,
right?
And you say, wow, it must be like what? It must be about a mile away from it.
Yeah.
That's a really big mountain, Then you're walking, you already walked 3 miles, and now the mountain looks much bigger. I say, wait a minute, this mountain was a lot bigger than what I thought. And it wasn't just a mile away. We already walked 3 miles, and now it looks like it's maybe 5 miles away. And And you're walking and walking, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it looks farther and farther.
Right.
You say, wait a minute, I mean, how big is this mountain? And
Right.
how far away from it are we? And the more you keep walking, the bigger and farther it gets.
Right.
So finally you start getting a sense, your sense of hafla, I mean, as you walk and you get a bigger and bigger sense of hafla, but then the sense of hafla does a double take, you know. So all of a sudden it hits you that, wait, it's not even 100 miles and that big like I think. I have no idea how big it is and how far away it is.
Right.
And the thing that I'm seeing it at a certain size and a certain distance is just an imagination.
Right.
A mirage. And at this point, that's the real inyan of the hafla of the Eibishter. It's not the hafla that you actually get from seeing it and seeing how big it is, but that you're starting to realize that it's really, you're making a whole mistake, and it's just going to keep going like that. No matter how much you travel, it'll just keep getting bigger and farther.
Right.
And that's the inyan of the hafla. So that even the hafla, like, it's not that it has nothing to do with bina. Like we said before, there's no bina without chokhmah, no chokhmah without bina. The sense of hafla comes from the halsagas hashlila, actually.
Right.
But the sense of hafla is a positive thing.
Right.
That you actually see the hafla. The hasagas hashlila is a hasaga of bina, that it says, well, it's none of these things. And from this comes the sense of hafla of chokhmah.
Right.
But the nismachu b'cha is in the Eibishter mamish.
Yeah, the simcha, in other words, like right now, we are getting a simcha from learning. Our simcha is not from the fact that it's such an intricate, detailed study. That's not what we're getting the simcha from. Or that we're getting to understand psychology or something like that. Because if it was just an intricate, detailed study, so I could come up with more intricate, detailed studies. You know?
Right.
We can study quantum mechanics or something like that. And I wouldn't get none of this. I wouldn't get a simcha. As a matter of fact, I would get bored. You know? So if you think about it, our whole enjoyment and happiness that we're getting out of this thing. I mean, apparently you guys are getting enjoyment. You keep calling me every night.
Absolutely.
If you weren't getting something out of it, like, you know, like we learned, if there's no tainug, the midah doesn't exist. There's absolutely no existence to a midah, and also if there's no tainug, there's no ratzon. So you want to call me every night, there must be a tainug there. There must be a simcha and a tainug there. Where is that coming from? It's a tainug and simcha in what? The tainug and simcha is not in the thing that we're going to have this intricate study and we're going to talk and we're going to discuss, like you know, people have, you know, these like philosophy groups, you know what I'm talking about?
Right. They get together and hakachainik.
The hakachainik, they sometimes even have a philosophy group or a politics group where they discuss communism, right. even though they're all Republicans.
Right.
And they get a whole big simcha and tainug out of it. Out of the intricacies of the explanations.
Right.
In other words, the simcha is out of the intricacies of the explanation. The simcha of the bina is coming out of the beauty of the explanation.
Right. That's not what's happening here.
Yeah, the explanation. In other words, an explanation is a binyan.
Right.
You know, an explanation is a building.
It's an elegant structure.
It's an elegant structure, right. And when you look at this beautiful, elegant structure of the explanation, You know, like some people like to do mathematical problems.
Right.
Not because they need to do the problem in order to come up with a certain solution, and that's why they're doing the problem, but they're just doing the problem because they love to go through these elegant structures of mathematics.
Right.
Like the old ancient Arabs. It wasn't the Indian of Bina so much, the Arabs and the Greeks and stuff like that.
Right.
They came up with algebra and stuff like that. The original people who used to come up with these things got the simcha and the tainug out of the elegance of the structure itself.
Right.
What he's telling you, the simcha of Chassidus is not coming out of the elegance of the structure. It's coming out of the elokus.
Right. That's the whole thing, because that's the actual subject.
That's
but
subject.
my question is
That's
that
what we're actually trying to make contact with, so to speak.
Not contact with, that's what we're trying to understand.
right. But what I'm saying is
That's
this,
what I'm
And we're trying to understand it in a way of a yesh.
right, which is what I'm saying is that the nismuchu b'cha is a positive hasaga of the mahus of the Eibishter. Maybe not right now. Right now, maybe this.
It's not an actual hasaga. I mean, no, the thing is, later on, he will actually promise that Nagil Nismacha Boch Mamish.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
That when Mashiach comes, we will have it. Why? Because really, why Bina is into the etzem of the thing is because really Bina has the power to grasp the etzem.
Dafka, because it is the yesh.
Why? Because Bina is connected to all the levels of Bina. The whole thing of Bina is that it goes up and up and up, and it goes down and down and down. So that the Seichel, even though it's a Seichel, when it goes down into the physical world, catches the actual physical world to the point where it's not just a Seichel, but you can actually make a car. It's not just a theory of a car anymore. In other words, the theory that you can have a combustion engine and a wheel and stuff like that, and you can put them together, can finally grasp the thing of Bina as hasaga and grasping. What do you call that? There's another word.
Comprehension?
The grasping. Well, how do you
Comprehension?
Call that? Huh?
Comprehension?
Not comprehension. Grasping. How do you say that in Hebrew? To hold on to the thing.
Litvos.
Tafsan, it's called, right?
Right, litvos.
Litvos ba'inyan.
Litvos. That he says in another place. I think it was chapter 1 that
Tafsan.
it's called a tafsan.
Right.
That the Baal Bina is called a tafsan and the Baal Tvuna. You know, they said the Baal Bina is called a tafsan.
Right.
That he actually teifes in the actual etzem of the thing. So that, for instance, the Bina into the physical nature of the physical world, you see that it's finally teifes the actual thing so that you can actually make actual changes in the actual physical things.
Right.
And when you understand architecture, for instance, the intellect, even though to understand architecture is just intellectual. Same thing with engineering of how to build a car and all these things, aerodynamics. But nonetheless, the understanding, he doesn't want to just understand the theory of aerodynamics.
Right.
He wants to understand actually how the physical world works.
Right.
That's what he wants to understand. Not just something. In other words, when somebody's really trying to understand something, like for instance, if somebody says, I don't understand my children.
Right. It's because he wants to understand them.
Yeah, but he wants to do more than understand them. He wants to understand them to a point where he can actually make a change in them to actually control their behavior. I don't mean control necessarily in a bad way, but to affect their behavior.
Right.
That's what he means, to understand.
Right.
Or like somebody says, you know, I would like to understand politics.
Right.
Now, there's sometimes that some people want to understand, and they're not really interested in understanding the etzem of the thing. They're just interested in the Bina itself.
Right.
But that's not the real inyan of Bina. The real inyan of Bina is that you're trying to understand the thing itself, the etzem of the thing.
Right.
So that when you're trying to understand how a tree grows, is in order that you'll be able to come up actually with a better tree.
Right.
You'll be able to make better peaches.
Right.
Not just that you want to understand. You want to understand the actual thing to the point where you can actually be teifesit in a way of a yesh.
Right.
So the same thing over here, since what we're trying to understand is elokus.
Right.
So we're not trying to understand the explanation or even the emek hamusuk.
Right.
We're trying to understand the etzem of the inyan, the thing itself.
Right. We're trying to understand elokus.
Elokus, to the point where we can actually be toifus in it. And the same thing like when we said, I want to understand my children, means that if you understand them, you'll be able to control them. Same thing with nature. If you understand it, you'll be able to control it. Like if you, like there's people who are trying to understand tornadoes.
Right.
They hope that maybe there'll come a way that they'll be able to control a tornado. Maybe stop it in some way. Or at least predict it.
Right.
That's what it means to understand tornadoes. Especially in a way, like we said, that there's Bina and there's Tvuna. So
Right.
when we want to understand the Eibishter, means that basically we want to own the Eibishter.
Right.
We want to grab him and hold on to him, and he'll be in our hands.
Right.
We'll be able to control him in a way, so to speak. And we'll be able to predict him. And we'll
Right.
be able to know what does he want. In other words, when I say I don't understand my children, means I don't really know what they want.
Right.
And I don't really know what motivates them.
Right.
And I don't really know what I should do in order to motivate them to do such and such a thing.
Right.
And how do I motivate him to get a job?
Right.
He's 36 years old. He still didn't get married. I don't understand him. How do I get him to find a nice Jewish girl?
Right.
That means that you want to understand, right?
Right.
So we want to understand elokus mamish.
Right.
That's what we want to understand.
Exactly.
Okay, and the simcha that's coming from the understanding in any of these things...
But is that possible?
Later on he says it is possible. Because the
what
Bina is into the thing.
Your children or understanding this or that, that's on the down, which is limited.
It says that the Leviosin is such a big fish
unlimited, so
that he can jump all the way down and all the way up. You can't imagine how big the Leviosin is.
But how can you grasp the unlimited?
That's the thing.
In a way of Bina.
It's not possible.
In a way of a yesh.
It's not possible.
So how can that be?
What do you mean, how can that be? No, so that's what brings about the sense of Afla of Chokhmah. The sense of Afla of Chokhmah is that from Bina itself, like just you said yourself, you proved with Bina itself Hasagas Hashlila. You proved that this thing is not understandable.
Right, but we're promised.
Especially that here's a very simple logical proof. Not just like you say, how can you understand the infinite? Well, no, maybe there is a way to understand the infinite. Look at my buddy, the professor. He's doing the mathematics of the infinite. Maybe there is a way to understand the infinite, but the real Hasagas Shlila is like this. Lav Mikol Ilan Midas Klau. He is the source of the Bina.
Right.
So how can the Bina understand him?
Exactly.
Okay, and how? The Rebbe promises us that we can. Why?
Promises us.
Huh?
That's
That's right. When the Rebbe and the Torah is the same thing. The Rebbe says, the Torah says, Nagilam Nismach Haboch, and the Rebbe says that's what it means, Kipshutai.
right.
How is that possible? Very simple answer. It says, you can't understand, but the Eibusher can explain. The Eibusher is called Yahweh. And he understands exactly what he is. You say, yeah, but it's not explainable. He says, what do you mean it's not explainable? The Eibusher understands what the Eibusher is in a way of a yesh.
Right.
And he can explain to you.
Because he's called Yachol.
And how can you explain to an idiot like me? Because he's called Yahol. He has the length of Bina and the length of Tuna. You can't imagine what kind of a length the Tuna of the Eibusher has.
The Tunasa and Cheker.
The Tunasa and Cheker. What does it mean, Litwanosa and Cheker? It means he can even explain it to us. How can you do that? It says, en Cheker, you cannot, is what it says, Hakor Eloika Timsa, it's the same word.
Right.
It says, yeah, if you Hakor Eloya, will you be able to find it? No. But it says, Litwanosoi en Cheker.
In other words, he can bring it all the way
He
down.
can go past the Cheker. He can go past the Cheker and he can explain to you the whole thing. With all the details of the undetailed. And with all the definitions of the undefined. And how can he do that? That's where the sense of applause is. Wow. How can he do that?
Right.
Says, wow, what kind of tuna is that? And can you imagine what kind of tuna that is? He says, no, I can't imagine at all. And that's the sense of applause. Like right now, if you think about it, if you sit and think about it a little bit,
It's an impossibility.
what kind of tuna the Eibusher has, it's an impossibility. And at this point comes the bittul of tuna, the bittul of Chochmah. And what's the bittul of Chochmah? The bittul of Chochmah means that when you're confronted with this, you become the opposite of a Chacham. A petty.
Right.
The idiot. You say in front of this, I'm a total, I got no brains.
Right.
I mean, in front of wisdom like this, I got no brains. And what does it say? It says, Persi Yamin L'Kol Dover. When you go with Eibusher, you say, wow. The Eibusher can do anything, man. Did you know that?
Right.
I says, well, what are you talking about? What kind of things can he do? He says, oh, he can do anything. He can turn water into blood.
Right.
Water into blood. Wow, he can turn water into blood. He says, yeah. And you know what else he can do? He can make ice and fire go together.
Right.
So, wow. And he can make the water stand up.
Right.
And if he wanted to, we could turn this glass of water into vodka.
Right.
Says, wow. He'd be a nice guy to meet, wouldn't he?
He certainly would.
And it says, and you know what he can do even more than that? If he wanted to, he could make us smart. We could be a bunch of wise guys.
Right.
Wow, he couldn't do that, could he? You say, yeah, he could. Wow. That's the flaw of Bina, the flaw of Chochmah. The flaw of Chochmah, actually, when you get the flaw of Chochmah, it makes you the opposite of a Chacham. The idiot.
Right. Right.
No, the flaw of Chochmah shows you that you don't know nothing. That you're a total idiot. You have absolutely no Hasaga, and no Havana, and no Chochmah, and no Bina. And that the whole thing with all your explanations that you had is like nothing. It's not even a drop in the ocean. That's what the law of Chochmah is, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's the thing. So the simcha is v'yismchu boch dafka, that the simcha of Bina, however, is not from the explanation, but from the fact that the explanation is actually into the elokus. And we understand that we are actually learning about elokus, and that's what keeps you calling every night. You get a certain simcha out of it.
Right.
Which, by the way, that's the thing of that the simcha and the bechia is coming. What he's talking about is the simcha and the bechia is coming together, mamish together.
Right.
That means that you call every night because you get a simcha, and when you don't hear it, you get a bechia.
Right.
It bothers you, and the people it doesn't bother, so they don't call every night.
Right.
Why? Because it doesn't bother them. And they will tell you, oh, but yeah, really, I enjoy to learn Chassidus. They say, so why don't you learn it? Because it really doesn't bother you.
Right.
There's no real, they don't have a real simcha, and they don't have a bechia. Okay, Bach, Olefi, Anal, the Basoga Leis Machshava Tfisa Bei, As Rabba Mufla Ba'avlos Ha'erech HaNivdal Chulu, Haim B'chiat Koyach Ma De Chochma Behelam Kanal. In other words, that he sees that he actually has no real connection to the thing at all, and that's the bittul of Chochma. Im Ken Napachu, so it's opposite. She'ein ha-simcha b'mahusa. So it means that the simcha is not in the actual mahus. The chokhmah is in the mahus.
Right.
Means that the chokhmah is, even though it's negative, that you see that it's far away, but you see that the mahus is far away, and the hasaga of bina is giving you the simcha. You're really getting it only the hasaga is only into the Metzius of the Inyanim.
Right.
In other words, the relationships. You don't even know really what Atzilus is. You're just getting a relationship that Atzilus is higher than Bria. And how the spheros work up there is the same way that the spheros work down here, but you're not actually getting into the Mos.
Right.
The Bina is, first of all, it's only into the Metzius. And secondly, even that, it's really only into the explanation and not into the actual thing.
From into the Eichut Hitavut HaMitaveh.
Yeah, but even that, it's into the explanation.
Right.
And the Bina is like what he said in the last chapter, that the Bina is the Eichus Ishavus HaMishaveh.
Right.
It's not into the Mahaveh, it's not into the Mahaveh. Nismach HaBoch means into the Mahaveh.
Right.
Okay, so it seems, so what's going on here? Since he understands it, he has a saga of an explanation, this obviously is not the real true what it is.
Right.
Right. Rather, it's only an understanding of the tzimtzum of the thing, of how this power of the Eibishter comes to Mahaveh, the Mishaveh.
Right.
Chulu, u'bechochma, bechinas ein kanal, sham roi lios ha-simcha. That's where should be the simcha. K'mo she'amar v'yismachu bach.
Right.
So yismachu bach, since it's in the bach, so that should be really from the thing of chochma.
Because at least we're having a ra'iyah.
Whatever it is, but it's in the bach. But in other words, the hafla'ah, you say the hafla'ah is into the bach. The hafla'ah means that you don't get it. What don't you get?
The bach.
The bach. You don't get it.
Right.
But what you don't get, like a Fry Israeli, what he's not is Orthodox.
Right.
He's not a Reform. Now it's already changing a little bit. In the old days, he used to be he's not a Reform. What he's not is Orthodox.
Right.
So by the Chochmah, even though that he doesn't get it, but what he doesn't get is the Atzmus HaMahusa.
Right.
Whereas the Bina is why? Because the Chochmah is an Ein.
Right.
It's a not. He doesn't get it.
Right.
What he doesn't get, so since he doesn't get it, an Ein can be into the Atzmus. But a Bina is a yes. You actually get an explanation. You actually understand it. But
Right.
since you're actually understanding, what are you understanding? You're understanding the explanation. You're not understanding the actual Atzmus HaMahus.
Right.
So it should seem that when you say Nismech HaBach, that should be in Chochmah, not in Bina, because Bina is not in Bach.
Right.
Or even you say, yeah, but you want to understand the Bach. You say, yeah, you want to understand the Bach, but really you're understanding only the explanation. Shamar lezach simchak Moshe Amar b'yismuch HaBach v'eino ken ki yadua. Da bitul hefech simcha b'chochma dafka. That the bitul is actually the opposite of simcha. You feel like you're nothing.
Right.
Whereas simcha, the whole thing of simcha is like dafka, when he's at a wedding and he drank a bunch of booze and he's down jumping around. That's simcha. The whole thing of simcha is like a bunch of Cossacks that they feel there's something.
Right.
And everybody's dancing and knocking everybody else on the back and stuff like that. That's simcha, right?
Right.
Whereas bittul is actually the opposite of simcha, b'chochma dafka, v'simcha b'bina. So what's going on? He's saying, what's going on here?
Right.
Acha inyan hu, now the explanation. Ki yadua shebekol dov yesh hipuchos. In everything there's also its opposite. The gam shenigul lehipucha mamish, and even though it appears to be mamish, its total opposite. Adraba mizeh atzmai nire la'ayin shekol koicha eno ba rak mikoicha menagda mamish. From this itself, we see, from the fact that it's total opposite, we see that the whole power of it comes dafka from the opposite.
Right.
So what he means over here, that the power of understanding comes from not understanding. The whole push of understanding is when you don't understand something.
That's what pushes you to want to understand.
To want to understand. It's not the not understanding that pushes you to understand.
Right.
So it means that the push to understand is to understand what you don't understand.
Right.
So the thing in understanding itself, in Bina, he's saying it's not only that the Bina of Chassidus is into Elokus. He's saying the whole thing of Bina is dafka into Elokus. Because that's the most non-understandable thing.
Right.
Other things, you could say, well, those could be understood.
Right.
This, it's not just that you don't understand it, it's non-understandable.
Right.
So the whole push of Bina and the whole real inyan of Bina is dafka the Bina into the Elokus itself. Because that's the exact opposite of it.
Right.
So therefore, the whole push of Bina is dafka into the Elokus. Where is it? And this is like also in the Ksarim, in the the Eineg and the Tsar, the Pchi and the Chedva. According to how much you miss somebody, that's how much you want him to be there, and that's how happy you'll be when he's there.
Right.
That is dafka, the power of the opposite, that gives the power to the thing.
Right.
Al ken kedover
Im ken
kedover achad mamish, who, that means is really mamish one thing. Moya einig vatzar. Shalafi erech koyach painu bedover ma, kach mamish lafi erech, yimatze koyach itpalus atzar. Shehu gira and eira einig amenagbe. And that's how much you're going to want the thing. Dahainu im yamad lenegdo dover lebanta la'oinigahu liyos mina hepachulu. That if something will prevent him from having this thing,
right,
that's how much tsar he's going to have, according to how much oinig he had.
Right.
Beken lehefech ebrech ha'oinig midover ma lo yukar rak lefi erech hatzar beheder oisa dover. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Hulu, so it means Habri Koyach Echad Hu Mamish. It's Mamish one thing. So the understanding is actually the non-understanding. That the whole power of understanding comes from not understanding.
Right.
As you see, Dafka, that let's say you understood this very good. Let's say if Lakivyachol, if we would understand this better than the Mittler Rebbe understood it, then we wouldn't read this book.
Right.
The whole reason we're reading this book is because we don't understand it.
Right.
So that means that the actual power of Bina is the power of not understanding.
Right.
That's what that's the whole thing. And if you think about it into anything, that you see somebody who's trying to understand something real hard, and he's working and he's doing Bina, he's doing Hitbonenut, he's thinking about it. What does it mean? It means that he doesn't understand it.
Right.
So the same thing, the real power of Bina, what he's saying here is the real power of Bina, in a way more than all the other spheros, is Atzmus Elokus. That's what the power of Bina is. The power of Bina is Mamish Mushrash. Huh?
Because that's the ununderstandable.
That's the totally ununderstandable thing there is.
Right.
You know, and that means that Bina is Mushrash and Elokus in a way more than anything else.
Right.
Because Elokus is the total antithesis of Bina.
Right.
That's what Elokus is. Elokus is the total ununderstandable.
Right.
And it's more so in Bina than anything else. Like in love or fear, it's not the total antithesis. Dafka and Bina. Even in Chokhmah, like the whole thing in Chokhmah is that the whole Indian of Chokhmah, you see that it's not the opposite of Chokhmah really. It in a way it is, to a certain extent, but not like Bina. And Bina, it's mamish, the total antithesis of Bina, it's the total opposite of Bina. So it means that that's what Bina really is.
Right.
What Bina really is Atzmusa Umahusa, which is its opposite.
Right.
That's the opposite power from Bina.
Right.
In other words, of all the things that you can't understand, that's the thing that you can most not understand.
Right.
Of anything. And not only that you don't understand it yet, but you could understand it, but it's mamish totally non-understandable.
Right.
Which in this is in Bina even more than in Chokhmah. That in Chokhmah you can like have a flash or like an intuitive thing into Elokus, not that it's actually into Elokus.
Right.
But it's still not the total opposite of it. But what he's telling you here, that the Atzmus is Bina. That's what the Atzmus is.
Right.
Because it's Koyach Echad Mamish. And the Atzmus is a totally non-understandable. So since it's the opposite, That's the power of Bina. The actual power of Bina is the Asmus, what you can't understand. Like we said, that the power that drives somebody to understand something is the fact that he doesn't understand it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, when someone knows that something is unattainable, then he gives up hope of it. No?
Well, it depends how much tainug there is in it. And it's not really true. You look at a heroin addict. He knows that he can't get that first high anymore.
Right.
But he's still trying.
Right.
You know.
So it's because of the tainug.
Also that thing, I mean, the tsar can put him into a melancholy. So he'll stop trying. That's because of melancholy. Atzvus.
Right.
But that's the whole thing that it explains. You're supposed to have merirus and not atzvus. Merirus is the opposite power that dafka drives you.
Right.
You know. Where are we? Koach echad u mamish, rak shenechlak lebeis kovin shovin. Mamish is two equal lines going in two different directions. Ushkulin, and they weigh exactly bilti yet koach echad ala beis afilu kakoyte shal yud. So the tsar and the tainug is exactly the same.
Right.
So the same thing. The not understanding and the drive to understand is exactly the same.
Right.
So the drive to understand is the strongest in Elokus.
Right.
More than anything else.
Right.
To the point that you can say that that is the actual Mahus of Bina is the Mahus of the Eibishter. Because if you look very closely, you see that the Mahus of Bina into anything else, like you want to understand your children, and you want to understand psychology, it finally comes down to one thing, that it's really what you want to understand is Elokus.
Right.
And that, of course, is why the eighth king doesn't die. Because no matter what it is that he's trying to understand, the real Indian that he's trying to understand is Dafka Elokus. So he can't really become disconnected, even if he's disconnected for a while, because the whole thing of Bina is that he can get hung up in the details. But it doesn't matter. The real essence of it is Dafka Entered Elokus.
Right. That's what he really wants to know.
That's what he really wants to know.
Right.
Afilu kakoyte shal yud, not even like a dot. V'ken ha'chedva v'abchia, so the same thing with chedva and bchia, shelo efi erech ha'chedva, shu oinig ha'murgash begilui elokus b'asagos or kanal, exactly according to how much he's enjoying what his hasaga into the gilui elokus, exactly according to that, כך ימוצא קו הבייס שיוצא ממנו מכוח הדווקא, שהוא הבחייה על הדר גילוי האור בנפשה, מצד הסתר אלוקות, means that the bechia is dafka according to how much you understand.
Right.
So it means the more Chassidus you learn, the more you're going to be bothered about what you don't understand.
Right.
Because it's a fiera.
Right.
So that a guy that doesn't understand nothing, it doesn't bother him at all.
Right.
And it's dafka according to the chedva that he has, that's how much priya he'll have. So that dafka, a guy that knows a whole bunch of Chassidus, it'll totally bother him till he's totally what it says, Moyes b'chaya chayav mamish u'b'chaya kol zulosik. Means if they tell him, what if we make you Bill Gates and you'll be a super zillionaire? But you'll have to give up Chassidus. There's no way, man.
Right. It's not possible.
Not possible. And he can't even stand the whole life and the whole world. He says, I can't take this world. Mashiach has to come. So that we'll be able to sit and study the whole time.
And not get tired.
And the whole time will be just one giant Farbrengen.
Right.
Because, Farbrengen means you study Chassidus. That's the real Indian. Like you see by the Rebbe. You see by the Rebbe. That's what a real thing of Farbrengen is. And the Farbrengen means you study and eat and sleep, and everything is right there at the table.
Right.
And even in the between the Maimarim, you sing a song. It's all part of the Chassidus.
Right.
Till it totally, he says, I can't take my life anymore. Every day I have to go to work and I have to do this and that. Mashiach has to come, like what the Rambam says. That's the psak din of the Rambam in Halacha. That's why did they want Mashiach? It wasn't because of all the external things, Ma'adanim Ka'afar.
Right.
But because that will give them the time to study Chassidus. The more he tasted the taste of godliness,
right.
Means somebody who never tasted a steak doesn't long for it.
Right.
And also the opposite. That he totally cannot take his physical life anymore. From that you can see how much pleasure he's getting in Elokus. How strong it is. Why? Mamish equal. Canal. V'hainu priya misitra da, v'cheza misitra da b'shokol echad b'shove mamish. Ukmoiken l'mayla mizeh v'pchinat einig hanelam shebachochma. The same thing in the einig hanelam shebachochma. Mizeh ba b'pchinat habitul ma'atzmus l'gamri. He doesn't even know he's there anymore.
Right.
The Lashon Yiddish, zu trog and gore from sich. He's totally gone from himself. From the Einig Anelam into the Atmos, from the flesh of the Hafla'ah. The opposite of it, that he'll totally throw his life away against anything that will stop him from this.
Right.
That means anything that will make him feel himself.
Right.
Dahainu limos b'chaya betachlis. Hitbadlus amitis. To totally be mayas in his life. Mamili b'shamayim. What do I have to do with anything in heaven? Ve'im chalocha pasibar. What do I want from anything on earth?
Other than you.
Don't bother me with heaven and don't bother me with earth. I want to learn Chassidus.
Right.
Kala sheri lavavi, my meat and my heart is gone. I have nothing to do with my emotions. I have nothing to do with my meat.
Right.
Because it's mamish the same thing. The oineg and the b'chia is mamish the same thing.
Right.
And like what he's basically saying here is also that in Chokhmah also, that the Chokhmah is dafa into the Atmos.
Right.
Why? Because the whole thing of Chokhmah is that he feels that he doesn't have it.
Right, it's the flaw.
It's the flaw. But the main thing of that is Dafka and Bina. Because Chokhmah, the Indian of Chokhmah is Dafka the Ein.
Right.
So the fact that he doesn't have it, that's the Indian of Chokhmah. It's not a total negation. It's dafka and bina, there's a total negation of it.
Right.
So the same thing, really, the total negation of it also in chesed, for instance, there is a negation. That's why the chesed is dafka into the atzmos. The love, the real love, is dafka into the atzmos. Because he feels that it's impossible to love God properly.
Right.
But he can love God a little bit.
Right.
But in bina, he can't understand God at all.
Right.
Even with all the explanations and everything, he feels that he's not really understanding God a little bit. He's not understanding God at all.
Right.
Totally. It's a total lack.
Right.
So, whereas all the other things are, it's also the opposite of them, so therefore that's the real inyan of all the midos that like we understand. We say, what do you mean? The bina comes from Elokus and other midos don't. We know that all the midos come from Elokus.
Right.
And it says, the love is to all the midos. It's
Right.
the opposite from all the midos.
Right.
But nothing like bina. And that's why the whole inyan is bina shababina. Because that's the strongest power in Elokus.
Right.
Okay, I got to get going now.
So start the sentence from the beginning. Did you start it yet?
Yeah, it started.
Yeah, the thing about the bina, we are thinking about the bina, that the bina is a very special sphera in terms of that, he said that the bina is dafka into the atmos.
Right.
Because it totally is, the lack of the thing is the kav shokul of the thing.
Right.
The opposite of the thing is the kav shokul of the thing. So, like, in a couple of ways, you see the difference between bina and all the other spheros. One of the things is that dafka and bina, the lack of bina, causes you to want to have bina.
Right.
Where in the other spheros, it's not necessarily like that. For instance, the lack of rutzin for something does not make you want to want it.
Right.
Also, the lack of tainug in something doesn't want to make, just the opposite. You don't want to have a tainug in it.
Right.
Even the lack of chokhmah, which chokhmah is bittul, the lack of bittul does not want to make you have bittul.
Right.
And the lack of love or hatred does not want to make you have it.
Exactly.
The only one that is like that, a little bit, not quite the same as bina, is netzach. If you're losing, you want to win.
Right.
Okay, but that's only in a person that already has the midah of netzach. A person who's not ambitious, which ambition is the midah of netzach, right?
Right.
A person who's not ambitious, his lack of ambition does not want to make him have ambition.
Right.
Even though, like, a person who's losing wants to win. But that's really, basically, in all the midos, the once you have the midah, the lack of the midah wants you to have more of it.
Right.
But the thing is, in bina, you see that even a stupid person, who's not a bina type of person, you say, so wait a minute, doesn't that apply in bina also? But like you said, a non-ambitious person is not trying to be an ambitious person.
Right.
So you see, a non-intellectual person is not trying to become an intellectual person. Just the opposite. You think they're all eggheads and stuff like that,
Right.
But you see that it's not true, that even every person, no matter how stupid he is, he wants to be a maven. So they'll, even like people like, like the kind of people around here, if you talk, they'll tell you, the Steelers, why they lost, because, the quarterback, he made that play wrong.
Right.
He should have done it like that, and they'll give you a whole analysis.
Right.
And then they feel like they're a maven.
Right.
And everybody has to have a feeling that he's a maven.
Right.
And you see, their whole ego depends on being a maven.
Right.
Even in other things. Even like over here, football is the Indian of netzach. That they have to show that they're a maven. They can tell you the whole thing. Well, the strategy was wrong.
Right.
And the same thing with anything. If you look at any kind of conversation, like a conversation at the back of the shul,
Yeah.
or a conversation in the pool hall. They're all talking, they'll tell you, the stock market should have been like this and like that. Or the politics should have been like whatever thing they're into. The whole ego depends on the Bina. Because why? Because Bina is a yesh.
Right.
That it says the whole thing, like the thing from the, the thing from the Mittler Rebbe, that the guy came to him and he said that he has a Hargoshas Hayesh. So the Rebbe told him, you know what Hargoshas Hayesh means? So the guy was smart enough to just shut up. So the Rebbe told him, let me tell you a story. Originally there was a Nachash HaKadmoini, and he had a job to do. But then after the thing that Adam Arishan realized what happened, the Nachash HaKadmoini came and he cried to the Eibishter and he said, nobody's going to listen to me. They see the Nachash HaKadmoini, they won't listen to me. They're scared of a snake. So the Eibishter said, don't worry, I'll give you a new name. And he gave him a new name, the Satan. And this worked for many years. And everything was fine. And then people started finding out about the Satan. And nobody wanted to listen to him. So he came crying to the Eibishter. He says, how can I do my job? Nobody wants to listen to the Satan. He said, don't worry, I'll give you a new name. And he called him the Yetzirah.
Right.
And then this worked for many, many years. And I think he said that this was good till the days of the Baal Shem Tov.
Right.
Or something like that. I can't remember the exact dates he gave. He gave him a date for everything, when it changed over. He says, then they came over and he said they didn't know what, nobody wants to listen to the Yetzirah anymore. So he said, don't worry, I'll give you a new name, the Yesh.
Right.
And then it was worked out,
Right.
And then, finally, I guess it was in the days of the Mittler Rebbe or whatever, and the Alter Rebbe, I don't remember the exact who the cutoffs were. He said, nobody wants, everybody knows about the Yesh already. No, I think with the Baal Shem Tov, let them know about the Yesh. And he says, everybody knows the Yesh. He said, I'll give you a new name, the Hargoshas HaYesh. And he says, and you should realize the Hargoshas HaYesh, that's the Yesh, that's the Yetzirah, that's the Satan, that's the Nachash HaKadmoini.
Right.
Okay, so Yesh is the Nachash HaKadmoini, but it says that Chochmah is a Ein and Bina is a Yesh.
Right.
Not only that, if you see where the whole Yesh comes from, is the Chashmal of Bina.
Right.
Where the whole Yesh comes from.
Right.
The whole Yesh of something comes from Bina.
Right.
Not only that, it says that as far as the Ein upstairs, it's the light that's called the Ein. The Orein Seif is called the Ein. The Atmos is called the Yesh Amiti.
Right.
So the thing is that, like, the whole, both the good and the bad, it all comes out of Bina. The whole clippers come out of Bina. The whole thing comes out of Bina. Everything comes out of Bina. So, like, the thing is that, like, you see that the only thing that's different is, the only one that's the same a little bit like it is Netzach, right?
Right.
That by Netzach, if you're losing, you want to win.
Right.
Okay, but there's another thing that even Netzach doesn't have. And, like, first of all, it's like I said, first of all, like, Netzach is only by somebody who already has the Midah of Netzach. Somebody who's not ambitious doesn't want to be ambitious.
Right.
Whereas somebody who doesn't understand, he wants to understand, and the whole ego of the people, the whole yesh of the people, is to show that he's a maven in whatever thing it is.
Right.
But then there's another thing, in the thing that he said, that Bina is the farthest away from the Atmos. What does it mean? That when it comes to understanding, you don't understand nothing about the Atmos. The whole understanding is dafka into the how the Yesh comes from the Ein.
Right.
Not into the Atmos.
Right.
Whereas everything else, so like for instance, Tainug and Ratzin, So the Tainig and Ratzin is not how much it should be into the Atzmus, but it's still a little bit. Same thing with the Chochmah. Chochmah is Bittul.
Right.
Chochmah is the Argoshas HaFloah.
Right.
So the Argoshas HaFloah is not how much it should be, but
it's a little bit.
But even in somebody who doesn't understand that much, like we said that according to the Bina is the Chochmah, but even somebody like a regular person, still has a little bit of a flaw into the Eibishter.
Right.
Oh, that's why they call him the Eibishter.
Right.
Means he's higher. So there is a little bit of a flaw.
Right.
You know. And then the same thing with Das, which means connection. Some people are very connected, some people are not very connected, but they're not as connected as they should be, but there's still a little bit of connection.
Right.
The same thing with love. None of us love the Eibishter how we should, but there's still a certain amount of love.
Right.
A certain amount of fear. And Netzach is the thing of overcoming your bad habits and stuff like that in order to get closer to the Eibishter. So nobody is really that great with Netzach like they should be. But in everybody there's at least a little bit of overcoming.
Right.
And same thing with Hoidah. Your Moedid is... Everybody's Moedid to some extent that there's an Eibishter in the world. Even an atheist is Moedid that there's a reality.
Right.
You know. And the same thing with Yesoid, which is the connection from the Makabel to the Mashpia, or the Mashpia to the Makabel, but from down to up, it's from the Makabel to the Mashpia. And same thing with Malchus, Oil Malchus Shemayim.
Right.
That in everybody, even the worst kind of person, you'll see there's still a little bit of oil that he should be some kind of good.
Right.
You know? So over there, it's not a matter that it's totally missing and there's only the Eibishter. It's a matter of Kule Kamika Lo Chashiv. Means negligible. You know what negligible means?
It's very little.
Negligible means...
It's batul b'shishim, batul b'meya, batul b'elef.
Right. Like for instance...
It's there.
Right, like for instance, when you have a food that's sodium-free, it's not really true. There really is some sodium in there. You can't get it that there shouldn't be a molecule of sodium in the thing. I mean, you could maybe theoretically, but in actuality, to get a glass of water without sodium would cost you $1 million.
Right, and just like with alcohol, they can only make it, 98%?
No, I don't know. I think they can make it more. It's 99.99%.
They can't make it totally alcohol.
Yeah, they can. It's just that the minute you open the bottle, it'll absorb water. Pull all the water out of your finger. But even then, looks like it doesn't matter, 98 and 99.99, it's not 100%.
Right.
So, like, negligible means that there's a little bit there, but it's batul. Like you said, there's batul b'shishim, batul b'elef, batul b'million.
Right.
But it's still really there.
Right.
It's just, as it says, like, Kule Kame Kolo Chashiv. In front of the Eibishter, it's like it doesn't exist. And in front of the Eibishter, it's not like Batul B'Shishim, which Batul B'Shishim is a kind of an error.
Right.
But it's Batul like 1 over infinity.
Right.
So like they say, the 1 over infinity is 0. It's not really true. The 1 is still a 1.
Yeah, it's still a 1.
It's still a 1. It's just compared to infinity, it's like negligible.
Right.
It's as if it's a 0. So that really, like when people say 1 over infinity is 0, it's not really true because they don't know mathematics.
Right. 0. It's not. 0 is less than the 1, even towards the infinity.
Yeah, no, but there's no such thing as 1 over infinity is 0. It's not a real mathematical formula. The actual mathematical formula is like this. 1 over 2 is a half. 1 over 3 is a third. 1 over 4 is a quarter. And as it approaches 1 over infinity, the numbers get smaller and smaller to where they get more and more negligible, and they approach 0.
Right.
1 over the bigger and bigger numbers. As the numbers approach infinity on the bottom,
Right.
the thing approaches 0.
Right. But it's not actually there.
It's not actually 0, because 1 is still 1.
Right.
In other words, even if you have, like, what do you call it? Like, we were talking about that the guy was telling Shimon that if you just dilute it with a little bit of water, so what's the big deal?
Right. This is kind of like Zeno's, what it's called, Zeno's
paradox. Yeah.
Paradox.
Yeah. No. But what he told Shimon is they were talking about real Yiddishkeit and diluted Yiddishkeit.
Right.
So he said, so what if you take vodka, if you put a little bit of water in it, it's still vodka, so it's just slightly weaker. So I told Shimon, so tell him, what if I'll give you a glass of vodka and I'll spit in it? I'll spit in your vodka.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Okay, but in the ocean, if let's say I'm standing next to you in the ocean, there you don't care. But to the ocean, it's already negligible. Even you have rotten fish in it. To the ocean, it's negligible. But
right.
It's not that it's not there.
Right.
It's still there. I mean, whatever amount of fecal matter the fishies made, it's totally there, all of it.
Definitely.
The absolute amount is there. It's just what? It's kalo chashiv.
Right.
So that's what it means, kula kame kalo chashiv.
Right.
Kula kame kalo chashiv means kula kame.
There's a chaf, kelo.
Huh?
There's a chaf there, kelo chashiv.
Kalo chashiv, right, that's what I said. Kula kame kalo chashiv. Kalo chashiv. Like. It's like it's nothing.
That's what I'm saying.
Wait, hold on for a minute.
It's nothing.
Yeah, but Einod Movadoi is a different thing.
Right.
Einod Movadoi means 100% pure alcohol.
Right.
And there's not even one molecule of water in it.
Right.
Not just not one molecule of water, there's not one molecule of anything else. There's not one molecule of dust in it. There's not one molecule of sodium or whatever.
Right, it's pure.
It's pure whatever it is.
Right.
Means Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing else but this in here.
Right.
There's nothing else here.
Right.
Okay, so the only thing that is Ein Od Milvado, well, there's actually two things that's Ein Od Milvado. There's the Eibishter. There's Ein Od Milvado. The actual Atzmuso Mahusoi Ein Od Milvado, right?
Right.
There's one other thing that's Ein Od Milvado. It's Bina. In Bina, there's not one iota of understanding into the Atmos. It's not that it's just negligible that you're actually understanding into the Atmos. Like he said, if you understand, it's not into the Atmos. That's what we learned yesterday, right?
Right.
If you understand anything at all.
Right. So that means it's not into the Atmos.
It means it's not into the Atmos. Right, so that means that Bina is the complete opposite of Atmos, and the Atmos is the complete opposite of Bina.
Right.
Two Kavin Shkulin, exactly the same.
Right.
In Chochmah and Ratzin, everything else. I mean, like we said, the Ratzin, it's not that there's no Ratzin, and there is a little bit of Ratzin into the Atmos, so there's a little bit of Atmos in the Ratzin. The Ratzin is actually, you want the Atmos. And the Chochmah, the Bittul, the Haflor, is the Haflor, like he says here, the Haflor is in the Atmos, not in the coming of being into the, of the Yesh from the Ein.
Right.
It's from the Haflor is of the Atmos.
Right.
And even though obviously really the amount of afloa that we have into the atmos, or even a big guy has into the atmos, you say, well, how much afloa is it? It's kulakamikalachashu. It's like nothing. He says, yeah, it's like nothing.
Right.
Compared to the atmos, it's nothing. Compared to how much afloa he really should have, it's nothing. But still, there's a little bit there.
Right.
The same thing with love. Like even Avram Avinu said, Anoichi ka'afar ve'efer, and it explains in Chassidus, in Tanya it says this, that what do you mean afar ve'efer? It's a mushal. It's the same thing like a big tree. When you burn it, there's nothing left but a little bit of afar ve'efer.
Right.
So compared to the midas hachesed of Atzilus, his chesed that Avram is oihavi, right?
Right.
Is like afar ve'efer compared to the actual tree.
Right.
It's like the tree is gone. It's like nothing's there, but it's not really nothing. There's afar ve'efer.
Right.
And the same thing with everything else. Netzach also.
Right.
And Netzach also, I mean, you overcame a little bit, and Haid, you're Moide not like you should, and Malchus, and Yesaid, and Malchus. He's not Mekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim 100%, but a little bit is there.
Right.
Okay, but in Bina, this is what he said. It's after if there's a little bit of Bina there, it means it's not into the Atmos. If there's any kind of understanding, it means it's not into the Atmos.
Right.
So Bina is the exact opposite of the Atmos.
Right.
And this is what, if you look in the...
This has something to do with Omek Ram and Omek Tachas?
It has very much to do with Omek Ram and Omek Tachas. Omek Ram is the Yesh Amiti, and Omek Tachas is the Yesh HaGomer. That's what we were that's the next thing I was going to get to. If you read now the Maimer from the Mittler Rebbe, which is called Ata Echad, he says that the revelation of the Yesh Amiti is Dafkan the Yesh HaGomer.
Right.
And what's the Yesh HaGomer? Yesh HaGomer is Dafka, a person who understands.
Right. Exactly.
That's what the Yesh HaGomer is. And like he said, that from the understanding you get a Yeshus and a Simcha.
Right.
A Yeshus to a point of Simcha, that he is like drunk with his, it says Bina is Yayin.
Right.
Bina is called wine. And
Yain Mesamech Levav Enosh.
Yain Mesamech Levav Enosh is Bina.
Right.
And also Levav, the Lev, Bina Liba.
Right.
And then there's also called, like, that's Yain is the Rozi HaTorah Bina, and then there's Rozi the Roz and Bina Shebe Bina, Chassidus. This Hitbonenut of Chassidus is called vodka. Mashke.
Right.
In many places there's where they call it mashke, Even like the songs, don't you worry guys what's going to happen to our lives. We're going to end up in Las Vegas and we'll have some vodka too.
Right.
They didn't say Las Vegas, they said a Ruski equivalent. Oh, actually, Mendy said it's Kamchatka, he didn't say not Kamchatka, it's the Krechma. There's a few versions. Mendy said the version he heard in the Krechma. Krechma is a bar.
Uh-huh.
We're going to end up...
more correct.
Huh?
That's
Whatever. In Las Vegas and the bar, whatever. In other words, don't you worry, guys, what's going to happen with us? We're going to end up in the bar and we're going to have some vodka too.
Right.
And this is a Chassidic song. So what kind of Chassidic song is that? Because vodka means Chassidus.
Right.
And really, Chassidus is called Zexeneinziger sometimes.
Right.
What does it mean, Zexeneinziger? It's really not Zexeneinziger. That's wrong.
Really, it's 100%.
100ker.
Right.
The real Chassidus is 100ker.
Right.
What does it mean? That it is 100% alcohol.
Right.
How can it be 100% alcohol? Because, You know that, what do you call it, when your sink is plugged, you get a pump, you know?
Right.
And what do? You create a vacuum.
Right.
And the vacuum sucks it in.
Right.
So the biggest vacuum is Bina.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Eibusher says. It says that he can only be in an empty place.
Right. Right.
If you're there, he can't be there. If there's something there, he won't come there. So you say, what do you mean? Dafka, the Eibusher doesn't want to be there where there's a yesh. If you're a yesh, so he won't come there. He says, yeah, that's a different kind of yesh. A yesh of Bina means that it's totally empty from the Eibusher.
Right.
It's a total vacuum. That means it sucks the Eibusher in.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
It's 100% vacuum.
Because there's a lack of understanding. Therefore,
100%.
There's 100% lack of understanding, which is an absolute vacuum.
Right, it's an absolute vacuum. So it sucks them in totally.
Right, therefore it has the effect of sucking in
totally
in an absolute sort of a way.
Where other things like love, for instance, you can feel like a person works on himself, like Chavas Alvavis or something like that, you know, to feel that he has a vacuum of love for the Eibusher.
Right.
In order to bring the Eibusher in, or a lack of fear. But that's not 100% vacuum.
Right. But you have some.
Okay, but it's not 100% vacuum, and it's not a vacuum of the Atmos. There is some Atmos there. So and the thing, it says, with the Etzem, if you're teifes in any part of the Etzem, you're teifes in the whole Etzem.
Right.
It says that, right?
Yeah.
So it means that since there's a little bit of Etzem there, so there's no vacuum. So there's no vacuum. The whole Etzem is there.
Right.
In Bina, it's exactly the opposite. That's what he says. He says, if there's any Atmos there, means if you had any Bina, there's no Atmos there.
Right.
If there's any actual Atmos there, it's not Bina.
Right.
So then he says, so how can that be that Dafka Bina? Not only that, this goes all the way back to chapter 1. Why are we going with Bina?
Right.
Why not with Chokmah? Or why not with Midos or whatever?
Right.
This is Ha B'Hatalia. It's Mamish Shnei Kovim Shkulim.
Right.
And that's the thing, that's Dafka where the Yesh HaMiti will come Dafka into the Yesh HaGomor, which the Yesh HaGomor, the real Yesh HaGomor, like we said, that's what the whole Yeshus of people is, that they understand. They, you know, when people schwitz around with their Yesh, what they're schwitzing about is how much they understand.
Right.
In this whatever stupidity it is. And that's also the other thing that he says, the schwitz. It says, Bezer Yishalo HaMishalo. And you notice what he calls him, you know, there's a thing from the Gra that he says, you know, by Hilchas Pesach, in the middle of Pesach, a cotton shegadol, a evet shenishtachrer, I don't know if you remember, there's another one, and then it says a ger shenitgayer. A ger shenitgayer. In the middle of Pesach, they explain where that he becomes mechuyav immediately in Pesach.
Right.
No, it's a ger shenitgayer, so it says a cotton that grew up. Before he was a cotton, then he grew up.
Right.
Eved shenishtachrer, first he was an Eved, then he became a free man. It should have said a goy shenitgayer.
Right.
First he was a goy, then he became a ger. It doesn't say that. It says a ger shenitgayer, and from this he deduces that a ger already has the soul of a ger.
Right.
So over here also, I mean, how come it says Yitzhalo HaMishalo? That's what it calls him. It says a Chacham, a gibor, a asher, and then it says a mishallel. You know, also mishallel. You know what's hallel. Hallel is the same root as hoilulus.
Right.
You know what hoilulus means? Hoilulus.
Self-praise is what it is.
No. Hoilulus.
There's all sorts of ways to explain this. Hallel means praise.
Praise, yeah. Mishallel.
Self-praise.
Mishallel means he praises himself.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, but also, hallel comes from hoilulus. Hoilulus means like a wild party.
Yeah, Holalus also means like wildness.
No, but not just a wildness, a wild simcha.
Yeah, of self-abandonment.
Okay, but it's a hoilulus of simcha.
Right.
Hoilulus doesn't mean like a hoilulus of sadness. A hoilulus means a wild party.
Right, like meaningless simcha.
It's not just meaningless. The main thing is that it's totally crazy simcha.
Right.
Hoilulus doesn't necessarily mean that it's meaningless simcha. There could be a reason for the simcha to start off with, but you're not supposed to go into hoilulus.
Right.
Even when you have a simcha, like let's say it's Sukkot or Pesach or something, or whatever, you're not supposed to just get totally drunk and go into total hoilulus.
Right.
But here you're allowed to. Not only allowed to, he's called him mishallel. He's making himself two things. He's praising himself. He's schwitzing, means he's making himself into a total yesh.
Right.
And he's flipping out.
Right.
He's drinking vodka and then throwing up and falling down in it. That's called hoilulus. Isn't that what hoilulus is?
Yeah.
That's what hoilulus is himself, you know.
Right.
That's called hoilulus.
So how does it apply to here?
It says, "B'zois is halal am is halal." It says over here you can have simcha without bounds at all.
With self-abandonment.
Total self, you can flip out with simcha over here.
Right.
That's one thing. And also another thing, you can become a total yesh. Not only you can become a yesh to yourself, but you can go around telling everybody else I am the greatest. Mishallel.
Right.
Mishallel means he's telling everybody that I am the greatest.
Right.
Like it says, Hallelu HaShem, Kol Goyim. He's doing it to himself.
Right, like Cassius Clay.
Yeah, I am the greatest. So the basic thing over here is that's the whole special thing of Bina, you know? So this is the basic thing that the Bina is a special thing. So before we learned that Bina is a special thing in terms, chapter 1, 2, and 3 explained that Bina is a special thing in terms that all the powers are activated after by Bina, whether the power is above it or whether the power is below it.
Right.
And the Bina can go both up and down. Means in terms of understanding, you can go up and you can go down with Bina. Then chapter 4 basically explained that it is Dafka, the Inyan of the Prat, which again that's the Inyan Dafka of Bina.
Right.
And then chapter 5 explained that there's no Chokhmah without Bina. And the thing is, you say, yeah, but there's no Bina without Chokhmah either. It says, yeah, but the real thing is Bina. You can't have a Chokhmah
Without the Bina.
because we said in chapter 1 that you can't have a Chokhmah just to start to have a Chokhmah, but you can have a Bina. You can be Hitbonenut.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, that's where the Chokhmah comes from.
Right.
So that's Bina, and now he's telling us that the Bina is Nagil of an Ismach Habach Mamish.
And therefore, you know that the Omek Tachas is the Mavuin, the Chokhmasa.
Yeah.
But it's the Mavuin.
Mavuin from under the ground.
It's what stimulates the Chokhmah, which is the Bina Shel Bina.
The Bina should be Bina, but the thing is, what stimulates the Chokhmah is what Mashiach will do. He'll cut open the river.
Right.
Into the depth of the Mabuin. So
Right.
that the whole Mabuin will come straight out into the river. So, okay, so where are we now?
So what's the Mavuin?
The Mabuin.
The Mavuin, the Chokhmah is the Omek Tachas. We just said the Bina is the Omek Tachas.
Okay, but it says Pnimius Abba is Pnimius Atik. That's what they explain over there. That the external spring is Chokhmah.
Right.
The aquifers is not Chokhmah. The aquifer is Atik.
Right.
And Pnimius Abba goes into Pnimius Atik.
Right.
But it says Pnimius Bina, Pnimius Imas, Pnimius Abba.
Right.
And what's the difference? The difference is that Pnimius Abba is the aquifer inside the aquifer. Not outside. The opening up of the Mabuin comes down from Bina to bring it out. That's the Ishtvuna.
Right. That's what.
So the Ishtvuna can be doile from the aquifer. That's the whole union of a well. A well goes into the aquifer, and the Ishtvuna can be doile. Now that's a regular Ishtvuna. But there can be another kind of Ishtvuna that can open up the whole aquifer and bring the whole aquifer out.
Right.
Not in pails. It Patchul Maboy in the Chokhmah doesn't mean that it's the Chokhmah that did it. It's the Bina that did it. It's the Tvuna.
Right.
Because the Maboy in the Chokhmah is that it comes out tippin'. Through the Chalchal and Mechulchale,
Right.
But to open up the whole thing means to bring the depth out to the outside.
Right.
That's what it means, Patchul. That what does it mean, the Mabul? The Mabul means that the aquifer came out.
Right.
It wasn't a depth anymore, and the same thing with the Oimek Roim.
Right.
The mind from above the Shemayim came down to the open.
Right.
And that's done by Bina. That's what he said in chapter 1. It's the Bina that does that.
Right.
But the Mabul will come from Bina. Why? Because it's not just that he'll reach to the aquifer.
Right.
Inside the aquifer.
But that he opens it up.
And not just opens it up, he brings it to the shallowness. He'll bring it out to on top of the earth.
Right.
That's what happened in the Mabul. He'll bring it out to here. And then the whole place, the whole earth will be Mala Azdas of Ayika Maimli Amachasim, like it was by the Mabul. The whole earth was covered up with water like the ocean.
Right.
So that's also Bina. So to bring the aquifers out is an union of Bina and actually Tvuna. So where are we now?
We're...
Oh, Al Yedei Ze Chulu. V'ida Chulu K'moshim Bor Baksovim, right? There's a little parenthesis, Moshim Bor Baksovim, but not quite halfway down the page.
Okay, let me put in a new tape.
Yeah. Three, four, five, six lines down. 6 or 7 lines, the Dal.
All right, that's where we are.
That's where we are, right?
Right.
Okay. Ve'ina yesh b'chia l'mayla. What does it say after that?
Mizu.
Mizu.
והוא הבא מהיעדר ההשגה מחמת עוצם ההפרעת וההבדלת.
Okay, so he said like this. Up to now we learned 2 kinds of things. There's the B'chia, the first one was the B'chia al Heder Giloy Arben Nafshay, because he doesn't understand. Mitzad Hester Lakus.
Right.
The next one is Bo'ene Ganelam Shebechochma Shemizeh B'chinet Habitul Masmus Legamre, till he's totally cannot stand anything that goes against it.
Right.
And this is Moez B'chai B'tachvis Itbatzlus HaMitik Mamili B'shamayim V'im Chaloch HaPasti Kol HaChulu Kibez Tovim Shkulin B'shavehen Kanal V'dal. And that's of Chochmah. And there's a thing in Toshin Chet, the Friedrich Rebbe says that the real Pnimius Chochmah, it says Pnimius Chochmah is the Klei Achma of Chochmah, it says of Chassidus, but he says that's really the Chitzonius of the Pnimius Chochmah. The real Pnimius Chochmah is where he cannot stand that the whole world is not studying Chassidus.
Right.
Because it's standing in his way. He wants to go outside in, what do you call it, Times Squares, and the big billboards will have Chassidus on them.
Right.
And he says that's the real Pnimius Chochmah. That he can't stand that the world is not studying Chassidus. That's the real Pnimius Chochmah. V'hina yesh b'chia l'mayla mizu, even higher than this, v'hu haba meheder ha'soga mitchames oitzim ha'flos v'avdolos ha'erech mipnei shelo yachilu kli moicha echulu. And this is in Bina, not in Chochmah. That he can, in other words, the first one was the haflah, that he feels how far away it is, and that's why it is the b'chia.
Right.
But he feels how far away it is from his seeing. This one is that meheder hasoga, that lack of understanding, because the thing, not because he didn't understand it yet. The first one was that he didn't understand the first one was the b'chia from the lack of understanding into the explanation.
Right.
The second one is from the erech ha'afla'ah of Chochmah.
Right.
The third one, in other words, the lack of understanding and Bina awakens the second one, which is the erech ha'afla'ah of Chochmah. And the erech ha'afla'ah of Chochmah awakens the third one, which is now back to understanding, that now he understands that this is totally gone from him. It's not understandable.
Right.
Not that he didn't understand the explanation, and understood the explanation, fine.
Right.
To the point that he had the total flaw from it.
Right.
And now he sees that it's not a thing that he's going to understand the explanation. He understood the explanation. But he's not going to understand the actual thing, because it won't fit in his brain.
Right.
No matter what he does. When Rabbi Akiva heard the Seder Hishtalshelut, his eyes cried tears, because his brain couldn't take it in.
Right.
The whole bepchinas haflo steamin to call steamin. The hainu ba'atzmus or insof mamish. Asher bilti musa klau. You can't understand it. It's totally bilti musa. Adraba, just the opposite. Kol shiyamig yaiter, yaiter yipale. The more you look into it, the farther is away. Kanal, like we explained before. And even more than that, that actually, as far as the Bina, it's totally separate, even higher than the Chochmah. That you have absolutely no Bina into it at all.
Right.
Zero. Absolute zero. Shemizeh davka libo doyeg uboiche. He says, why? But because, remember, the whole thing of Bina, what does he want to understand? He started learning Chassidus. Why? He wants to understand God. Libo doyeg uboiche she'eno ba rak me'etzem hatainug v'ashuka lahasig ve'eno yochel.
Right.
And it's exactly the opposite. The same like the thing when his family went to the airport and they left.
Right.
The great loss that he feels, and he's crying, is exactly the same thing of how much pleasure he had when they're there.
Right.
וידוע שזהו עיקר בחינס הכלו לבחינס חוכמה ברזן דרייסה. That's after the keli for the chokhmah in Razin Doraisa, which this chokhmah comes after from the Bina, by the way.
Right.
It doesn't mean a chokhmah bitul, it means of actually knowing. Like the Arizal or something like that, or like the Rebbe.
Right.
Moshe Vorb Makamacher, Be'inyan en Moisrin Razi Teira. So he says, well, how could you understand if it's not possible to understand? He says, Moisrin.
Given over.
Give it. Huh?
Given over.
It's given to him.
Right.
He can't understand it, but the Eibusher can give it to him, because the Eibusher is the Eibusher. The Eibusher does understand it.
Right.
It's not just that the Eibusher is the Eibusher. The Eibusher understands it.
Right.
In a way of an explanation.
Right.
Says, and Moshe Raza Taira, Elo Lamisha Liba Doeg Bekir B'chulu. Somebody whose heart is worrying inside of him. How come he can't understand the Eibusher? And
right.
This, by the way, this can only happen through Hitbonenut.
Right.
You can't say, oh, well, I want to understand the Eibusher, so why aren't you studying Chassidus? Well, you told me yourself that it won't explain it anyway. So it's not like that. These are three levels that come one from the other.
Right.
Aval Shahaya Masig La'atmus Oir and Seif Mamish. But if he would be Masig, Sadoig Bekirbo is crying totally, he has absolutely no Hasaga, zero Hasaga in the Eibusher. But if he was Masig to the Atmus Oir and Seif Mamish, Shamu Inyan Asimcha Ba'atzmusay. There, the Inyan is of the Simcha in the Atmos. When is that? When he understands the Atmos Erein Sof Mamish, means the Atmos of Mahus of the Eibusher.
Right.
He says, so she said, what do you mean? He says, if he would understand. She says, what do you mean, if he would understand? Since there can be a crying from the lack, the header of it, that header of it is the same thing like the Simcha. It's the same thing.
Right.
Like how much he misses the people, that's how much he enjoys the people.
Right.
And now he's saying, Shamu inyan asimcha batzmusay, ve'af al pi, shehu gilu ya'einig elokiyah baba morgish davka. It's a simcha, not a bittul. It's a simcha vasoga.
Right.
It's a tainug morgish. There's a difference, a bittul is a tainug lo morgish, like he said. He doesn't feel that he's there, and even this he doesn't feel.
Right.
But this he does feel.
Right.
אבל שורשה באמס בעצמוס התענוג הנעלם שממנו יצא היפוכי. It's the same thing. שהוא הבחייה מהדרוי. שהוא הפלא והבדולה canal, that it's a thing that is totally non-understandable. Right? You base calling alalu shkulin. It's exactly the same thing. What did it say after? Gamkin?
Gamkin.
Gamkin, the Shavah Mamish. The same like the other, like we understood that in the first Bina and in the Bittul of Chochmah, it's Kovin Shkulin B'Shavah Mamish. So over here, the total lack of understanding because it's not understandable, and the total B'chiyah that he gets from this, and the total happiness that he would get if he would actually understand Mamish, the Eibusher himself, is Shkulin B'Shavah Mamish. It's exactly the same thing.
Right.
Hainu shalafi erech koyach oitzem megoydel atainug shahaya mitzanig be'atzmos davka shahaya masigo mamish. How much he would enjoy himself and be so happy if he would actually understand masigoy mamish.
Right.
Tach yimotze koyach hipucho sheyat chiyah mukak shelo yachilu kli moichel lahasig anal v'dal.
Right.
So hainu hach, it's the same thing. The same thing like you understand in love. How much, by love, how much he misses the people, that's how much he'll enjoy the people.
Right.
Somebody he doesn't enjoy, he won't miss. And somebody he won't miss, he won't enjoy. So the same thing over here. How much he would enjoy if he would understand the Eibusher Mamish, that's how much he's crying for not understanding. And this is only activated by the Afla of Chokhmah. Means Bina activates Chokhmah, and Chokhmah activates Bina again, but a higher Bina. Well, now he's going to give you the Seder Madregas. Names the Seder Madregas. It's not that you say, okay, well, I missed the Eibusher. No, it says the Madregas. Seder Madregas b'davar ve'fucho kachem. It has to be like this. Chedva b'simcha migiloi or laki hamusag mamish means in the explanation. V'pucho yoytze b'chia behester hamenagel means that he doesn't understand the explanation quite good yet, because it's hard to understand. Ulamayla mizeh b'pchinas oina v'chedva hanela shebekoyach ma dechochma ba'atzmus elokus hamahave hulu v'koycha b'pucho yoytze limos b'chayav u'b'chayav calls ulosei. Not only his own life, he can't stand the whole world. He can't stand anybody doing anything but learning Chassidus.
Right.
Well, merely, and he doesn't even care for nothing. He doesn't want to know from the angels. He doesn't want to know from nothing. He doesn't want to tell him, why don't you calm down, we'll send you to heaven. He said, I don't want to go to heaven.
Right.
Ulamaila, and even higher than this, Gam zeh ha'oinek v'achedva atzmis v'atzmis elokus dafka, this is the chedva. Ma v'yismuchu bach mamish begilui. They will actually have simcha in the atzmus mamish in a revealed way, in a way that they can actually explain. In hasaga. With an explanation. And I say, where's the explanation? And here it is, right? This book is explanation. The opposite of Nagil of Nispach Habach Mamish is when his brain cannot take it in. Then he will cry. Like we were saying before, like by the airport, huh?
Kid David.
Oh, Kid David, v'yanasan, like David Yanasan, the Avos Nafsha Ava, the Steve Vayishku Vayivku. Since they were separating, they cried.
Right.
Why? Why did they cry? Sheba mikoyach ribu yava b'taynu gagodlu shebi yechudam v'dibuk anchulu. That's how happy they were to be together. Kahai Gab. It's exactly the same thing.
Right.
Okay, you know there's
and that's dafka the keli for the asaga.
That is the keli. It's not just the keli for the hasaga. That is the hasaga. It's based in school in him. In other words, that's the whole thing that we said in understanding. The power of understanding is that you don't understand. That's the whole power of understanding. Unlike many other things. In understanding, the whole power of understanding comes from not understanding. In other words, how much you realize that you don't understand something, that's how much you'll get a power to do the Hitbonenut and to understand. Or like right now, why are we studying? Because we don't understand.
Right.
So it means, and what are we doing? We're doing Hitbonenut. The Hitbonenut is from not understanding.
Right.
Means Bina Shababina, the power of Bina Shababina, which means Pnimius Bina, is the power of not understanding.
Right.
Exactly according to how much you think you don't understand, that's how much the power of Bina will be. That's how strong the Bina will be.
Right.
So that a person who thinks he understands everything, he's not going to... He says, well, how much could there be already to understand by the Eibusher?
Right.
What could there be to understand already? And in general. I mean, it's almost self-obvious that the power of Bina is the power that you don't understand. That's why you're learning.
Right.
The whole Bina Shababina means to learn. So if I tell you I'm going to college, you say, what are you learning there? So I'm learning to be a doctor. That means I don't know yet how to be a doctor. That's why I'm learning. I'm learning. Learning means you're learning what you don't understand. That's the whole thing of learning.
Right.
So exactly according to how much he doesn't understand in the Lakus, which, in other words, when he learns Chassidus, first there'll be the crying that he doesn't understand the explanation because it's so hard to understand. Then, according to how much he will understand, he will get a sense of haflah.
Right.
Means he'll see that it's far away. And that sense of haflah will show him not that just it's hard to understand, but that it's impossible to understand. Not just impossible, it's not an understandable thing in the first place.
Right.
And this is that's the real power of Bina, and according to that awakens the power of Bina. Exactly according to how much he doesn't understand, that's how much he will understand.
Right.
According to the negative power, like a bow and arrow. The more you pull the bow back, the farther the arrow will fly.
Right.
So if he pulls it back to the total non-understanding, that there's absolutely zero understanding in Bina, this will go directly into what the zero understanding is in, the Atzmos.
Right.
And this is basically what, there's a mimer, Balayla Hu Nadashnasa Melech, from the Mittler Rebbe, that he explains that the miracle was, when you say Balaylahu Nadashnasa Melech, you're supposed to say it louder.
Right.
Why? Because that was the essence of the whole miracle.
Right.
That Achashverosh couldn't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, what does it mean? What about what happened before? Vashti died, and wasn't the main miracle when Esther became the queen?
Right.
He explains in terms of Chassidus that in the Laila Hahu, in that Golus,
right,
not the Shnas HaMelech, when it says HaMelech in the Megillah, it's Malka Shel Olam.
Right.
That the Golus is called Dormisa Dezah.
The what?
Dormisa.
Dormita, okay.
Dormita.
Right.
Dormita Dezah, the Dormir, to sleep.
The sleeping of Zeranpin.
The sleeping of Zeranpin. And when Zeranpin is sleeping, so everything is on a level. When a person is up, then the head is above and the feet are below. When a person is sleeping, everything is on the same level. The feet think they're the same level like the head.
Right.
Because they're sleeping,
Right.
And also the midos are all mixed up. It's not, the brain does not control the chagas and the he.
Right.
But it could be the opposite, and that's the whole union of dreams, that the dreams come from the liver.
Right.
That it comes from the nehi, actually. The dreams come from the nehi. And that's the whole union of a dream, that it comes from the liver, that the liver is now on the same level. There's the three kalim, moicha, liba, v'kavda. So the three kalim,
on the same level.
When you stand up, the moyach is the highest, the lev is the next, and the kavod is the lowest. When you're sleeping, it's all on the same level.
Right.
And the kavod can make up a whole bunch of dreams.
Right.
This is very nice, and the king woke up, and in the future, the redemption will come, Mashiach, and then the king will really wake up, because over there he just nodded the Shnas HaMelech, but then he went back to sleep.
Right.
He just got woken up for a little bit.
Right.
Then he went back to sleep.
Right.
But he says, but that's all very nice. It's a very nice Kabbalistic explanation. But why does he have to sleep in the first place?
Right.
After all.
Why is he sleeping?
Why is he sleeping?
First of
all, it says, Hina lo yanu v'lo yishan sham Yisrael. And then it says, Ura, what is it? Ura lama tishan or something like that. Wake up, Abisha, why are you sleeping?
Right.
So the thing really, why is he sleeping?
Right.
So he explains, the whole thing of the Golus is like a dream. It's the dream of their Anpin, and in a dream can happen all kinds of crazy things.
Right.
You can open your door, and you walk out the door, and you're in China.
Right.
And a tree can grow upside down. You can have a tree growing from the roof, from the ceiling, going down.
Right.
You can have all kinds of crazy things.
Right.
But in Shaar HaYichud, he explains where the dreams come and the demons come and they mix up the letters from the daytime. It's only what you think in the day, you dream at night.
Right.
Then the demons mix it up and whatever.
But he says, from this word and letter from that word.
Yeah.
Put all up.
But he says in this book here, he says in Shaar HaYichud, he says when you get to the dreams and towards the end of the book, he says, but pila bekupa de machta you won't dream.
Right.
It's only things like in the daytime, but something totally ridiculous like a pila bekupa de machta, you don't dream. The Chassidic Rebbe says, he brings up a quote from someplace. He says, a pila bekupa de machta, where could that happen?
Only in a dream.
Only in a dream. He said, what are you talking about? Didn't the Mittler Rebbe says, but a pila bekupa de machta, you don't dream. He says, yeah, that's where the dream is meir hura de liba from the daytime. That's a normal dream.
Right.
But then there's nightmares.
Right.
Where the dream gets totally crazy. And it's nothing like the daytime anymore.
Right.
And you can already finally, in a terrible nightmare, that you already realize that you're in a nightmare.
Right.
It's so terrible that you're already, in a regular dream, you don't realize that you're dreaming.
Right.
It's a terrible nightmare, and the person wakes himself up.
Right.
But he can't take it anymore because it's already so crazy that he realizes it's a dream.
Right.
He says, in a dream like this, where could a pila go into a kupa de machta? Only in a dream.
Right.
Means in a nightmare.
Right.
In a nightmare, an elephant can go to kupa de machta. And he said, and that's why the Abisha went to sleep. Why? Because he wanted to have a nightmare, so we should end up in Europe and then in America finally. And what can happen in a nightmare? The biggest thing, a pila, can go in the kupa de machta.
Right.
And also, a pila is the biggest animal. Kupa de machta is the littlest thing. And also it means, in the roots of it is pila is pele.
Right.
And machta is choite. So it means that the Eibishter can go into the brain of not even Rabbi Akiva, but even a normal choite, a Russia, like a total American schwanz.
Right.
And where can that happen? Like there was a book, only in America.
Right.
And that's why that's the whole reason for the Golus, for the pila de kupa de machta. What's the pila de kupa de machta? This thing here, that it can't fit in his brain.
Right.
Because it can't fit in his brain. It's not possible. How could you fit it in his brain? It's not possible to fit in his brain. Then in America, you can do anything. Everything is possible in America. This is America. They told the Chassidic Rebbe, this is America.
Right.
So, anyway, I'm going to have to stop over here. Over here is that's the keli. The keli for the actual hasaga into the atzmus is the total lack of hasaga.
Right.
But that the total lack of hasaga should be a felt thing in a way of a yesh of bina. Not even in the way of the ain of the hafla of chokmah, but in the way of a yesh of bina, which, in order to do that, you have to learn Chassidus first. Like everybody says, oh, well, I don't understand, and I also don't understand nothing in Elokus, so does that mean that I should understand Elokus? Says no, because by you it's just a hidden thing that you don't understand Elokus.
Right.
You have no idea that you mamish understand zero.
Right.
Absolutely zero. You have absolutely no hasaga.
Whereas when you learn Chassidus, it's by way of a saga. You're mapping. You don't understand anything.
Hasaga, right. But the thing is that that's what it means. And he says that the kli moicha is, the kli can't be machil. It's not that it's like, even like when you say a pila b'kupa de machta, there's a sort of error still.
Right.
But really it's not even like that. The kli has absolutely no room at all to take this thing in. And this thing is absolutely too big to go into anything.
Right.
That's what and the thing is, you have to have actual hergish of this.
Right.
In the way of a yesh, that you should actually feel how much this thing is lacking in understanding.
Right.
And that's the keli.
In the way of a saga.
In the way of a saga, and that's the keli. A keli, you know what's a keli? A keli is a vacuum.
Right.
The main thing of the glass is the emptiness.
Right.
You know, not the body of the glass. The main thing of the keli is its empty part.
Right.
And that's what it says. Like, you know, if you have a full keli, you can't put nothing into it.
Right.
That's the thing. Everybody has a full keli.
Right.
If you have the proper bina, the real thing of bina is that it's totally devoid of elokus.
Right.
Totally. It's the best keli for elokus because it's totally empty from elokus.
Right. That's why a vacuum sucks.
A vacuum sucks.
The vacuum wants to be filled.
Right. And not only that, that's the whole inyan of bina, that it wants to be filled with elokus.
Right.
That's the main inyan of bina.
Right.
That it wants to know the true nature of reality. Like even you see, like by the scientists, you say that that's not really the thing of bina to elokus. How come people are doing bina into all kinds of other things? You see, what are they doing into? They want to know the true nature of reality.
Right.
That's the whole thing of bina.
Right.
They don't want to know just to know things. The real thing of bina, of a guy who's a maven, an intellectual, is he wants to know the true nature of reality.
Right.
He doesn't want to know just some stupid thing.
Right.
So that's the best keli. Okay, I gotta say goodbye. Okay, so let's go over a little bit.
Right.
And the basic thing is that what he explained is that of all the spheros, Bina is the one that has the most opposition. So therefore, it's the one that can get closest.
Right.
That the thing of the Bechia, the biggest Bechia is not in Chokhmah, but really in Bina. So that even though the first Bechia of Bina is not as big as the second Bechia of Chokhmah, but that wakes up the third Bechia of Bina, of the fact that not just he didn't understand it yet, meaning that he didn't have the explanation yet, but that even now that he did have the explanation, he sees that the explanation is not into the actual Atzmos.
Right.
And this is basically the thing that, as far as having the longing for the Eibishter, that is the strongest Dafka in Bina.
Yeah.
Because in all the other things, you do get a certain amount of satisfaction. You know, like that the Rolling Stones song, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction."
Right.
That's the strongest Dafka in Bina, because Bina can never get any satisfaction at all. So So like in love or fear, you do get a certain amount of love and fear. And the love and fear, and also in Chokhmah, the Haflah is Dafka from the Atzmus.
Right.
Same thing, the love and fear is of the Atzmus. Even though you don't get an actual grasping of the Atzmus, but that's in Bina that you don't get the grasping, but the love is for the Atzmus. And same thing with the fear. And same thing with the Haflah. And also with Das, and also the upper caste and the Rasan and the Tainug is for the Atzmus. But in Bina, like you said, if you understand it, it means it's not the Atzmus. Not only that, basically, if Bina is like this perfect vacuum cleaner, that the more you put into it, the emptier it gets.
Right.
You know, it's actually all the other ones. When they get a certain amount put into it, so in other words, like one of the things about the spheros is there's 10 kind of avodas. You know?
Yeah.
In avoda, there's an avoda from each sphera. So there's different.
Right.
So the same thing, like there's 10 kinds of people. You know?
Yeah.
In other words, it's the 10 general types, and really each person is a mixture. Like different characters are a mixture, so that down here, for instance, there's no such thing as a person who's all chesed or all gvura, but there's some people who lean more to chesed, some people lean more to gvura, some people lean more to emotions, some people lean more to brains, you know.
Right.
But, and the same thing in avoda. It's not that there's like a special avoda that's only love, because if without Hitbonenut, we say there's no love. But there's two things. First of all the avodas depend on Bina. That's what he said in chapter 1.
Right.
And that's the whole inyan of Kunter's Heit Pilus. That if there's no Hitbonenut, there's no avoda. So it means that, first of all the other 9 avodas, like for instance, the avodah of Malchus is Kibul Ol Malchus Shamayim.
Right.
You know, the avodah, there's avodah of love and fear, you know.
Right.
And like Netzach is the avodah of overcoming. I mean, there's various inyanim in it, but like basically the one that usually you think of is to overcome your bad habits by a force of willpower, you know.
Right.
To overcome, you know, and then Haidah means to be moide. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So there's all of these avodas, like, so for instance, like Haidah, for instance, without Bina, there's no Haidah either. You have to have a certain amount of Bina to get the Haidah. Haidah means that the Haidah goes that you're moide more than you understand. That's what it means, Haidah. You know? Hello? Yeah. Okay, so the thing is, besides the fact that all the other avodas actually depend on Bina, the other thing is in all the other avodas, there is a sense of satisfaction. And as you get a sense of satisfaction, it's like when you eat. The more you eat, the less hungry you get. Whereas in Bina, it's not like that. It's opposite. In Bina, it's the more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. And the less you know. In Bina, it's not the opposite. It's not like eating, that the more you eat, you get a certain sense of satisfaction.
Right.
And you get a certain sense of pleasure and stuff like that.
Right.
Over here, you get just the opposite. That even though you get simcha, but you don't get the tainug gets actually farther away.
Right.
Because even though you get a simcha, not only that, see, the thing is also that the haflah of chokhmah comes dafka from the bina. That's what he said in these last 2 chapters here. The flow of Chochmah comes from the Bina. Love and fear also. It comes like it says in many places. It comes dafkan from the Hitbonenut.
Right.
As a matter of fact, that's a halacha according to Rambam. Rambam explains that in order to get the love and fear, it comes dafka that's how he starts his whole Yad HaChazaka.
Right.
You know, and also even a thing of Kibul Ol Malchus Shemayim, that means that you're makabel oil without intellect, but still there has to be a certain amount of Bina to even get that started.
Right.
And that's the thing, you know, like the song that we were talking about yesterday, the Rebbe's song, that this is one of the songs that, Mamish the Rebbe singing himself.
Right.
The words say, Kamal Hanafshi, Kamal Hapsari, that the thirst is both spiritual and physical.
Right.
And how is it? It's a Ke'eretzia v'ayef bli mayim, means the no water at all.
Right.
The no water at all is Dafka and Bina.
Right.
Everywhere else, it's not pure. It's not a pure vacuum.
Right.
There is some water. And then it continues. Ken ba'kodesh chasiticha. Ken, in this particular instance, means thus.
Right.
It doesn't mean yes. It means thus. Thusly,
right.
Through this thing of having no water at all, therefore I have I see you in the Kodesh, and it says, Leroy ushok vadecha. And Leroy is that thing of Chochmah. But Chizayon doesn't mean actually to see. It's like Choyze b'kochavim, you know?
Right.
A Chizayon is actually an approximation.
Right.
It's not a clear sight. It means like a vision or something like that, you know?
Right.
And that's the basic thing, actually. So like what's the explanation that, you know, okay, so you're telling me that Bina is the opposite from the Atzmos, and therefore that's why it can grasp the Atzmos, but you just said that it can't grasp the Atzmos.
Right.
That's the whole definition of Bina. That's why it's so far away from the Atzmos, because if you grasp it, it's not the Atzmos.
Right.
So how can you say that it does grasp the Atzmos? So the thing of Bina, what Bina actually is an approximation or a simulation. What does it mean? An approximation, like a chizayon. A chizayon is like the way you get a picture on a computer screen. Like, you know, when I turn on my computer, I have the background picture is a picture of the Rebbe.
Right.
Or any picture.
Right.
If you magnify that picture, you'll see that it's made out of pixels.
Right. It's a bunch of dots.
It's a bunch of dots. And if you get it bigger and bigger, you'll finally see that it's not really a picture of the Rebbe at all.
Right.
It's really just a bunch of details, that's the whole inyan of Bina. It supplies details. And there's a thing, I don't remember how they call it in computer language, but it's the level of clarity.
Right.
You know, there's like 320 by 400,
600
by 800, 1200 by 1500.
Right.
There's more and more levels of clarity, and then also like certain pages, when they fill in, when you're downloading it, it doesn't fill like from the top down. It starts filling all over, and then you start getting something that looks like a bunch of squares, and you can't actually see what it is yet.
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw it. You're not such a big computer freak like me and Shimon, you know. But as it fills in, so like let's say you fill in some details.
Right.
And you fill in some more details. You still can't see what it is, but you can see that it's a human face.
Right.
But you can't really tell yet exactly who it is yet, because it's like all a bunch of squares or something like that. It's not filled in properly.
Right.
And as it fills in more and more, finally you can see it. And then finally you mamish see the Rebbe's face.
Right.
Just like the Rebbe standing in front of you.
Right.
But really, it's still really just an approximation, same like before when you couldn't see. It's just that before it was like 20 by 40, and then it filled in more and more until it was about 200 by 300. No, then when it reached a certain level, like for instance, my computer is a slightly older one, so I have it 640 by 800 or something like that. Some of the newer ones are, I think, like 1200 by 1500.
Right.
So it looks really sharp, but really, I can see the Rebbe.
Right.
It doesn't look to me like it's a bunch of pixels at all.
Right.
It looks to me just like when I stood in front of the Rebbe. And really, actually, if you think about it a little bit, when you're seeing, like right now, you're looking around, you're seeing the room.
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah.
It's pixels.
Right.
Your eyes are made of pixels. You know that?
Yeah.
In the back of your eyes, I don't know what they call it, the retina or something like that.
The back of the eye is the retina, right?
Yeah, it's made up of these pixels of different colors, which work exactly the same way like a TV, except the receptors instead of, there's pixels of different color which it receives, and that's why, like, if you look at the sun or a bright light, then you look away, it looks like you still have an after image because they get slightly burnt out until they regenerate themselves, So even when you are seeing anything, what you're really seeing is an approximation. And what basically happens, and it's the same thing like in a movie. In a movie, you're not really seeing anybody moving. Nobody's moving at all in a movie.
Right.
It's a bunch of still pictures.
Right.
And what happens, in other words, is the details.
Right. It's an optical illusion.
Well, it's not just an optical illusion. It's a little bit more than that. Yeah, it's like you said, it's an optical illusion. Same thing like when you see the Rebbe's face on the screen. It looks like it's an optical illusion, really, but it's not just an optical illusion. What happens is that the Chokhmah fills in the spaces of the Bina. So that, like, on a computer screen, when you see a circle, it's not really a circle.
Right.
It's really a multigon.
Right.
There's a hexagon and an octagon and a decagon,
Yeah, there are thousands of little edges.
Depends how many
edges there are.
How many edges there are. Like an octagon means there's 8 edges. On a computer screen, if you have a 640 by 800, it's not a real circle, because a real circle has infinite edges.
Right.
Whereas on 640 by 800, you can't get infinite edges.
Right.
But it's like what they say, close enough for folk music.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, because by the time it gets translated by your Chokhmah, the Chokhmah fills in the extra edges, and you see a circle.
Right.
And this is what it says, the Bina and the Chokhmah work together. So it is the same thing. Like, if you notice what the Rebbe said, the way he started off, like a lot of times you wonder why he starts off a chapter a certain way, and then he jumps and he says, but first we have to do something else.
Right.
You notice in chapter 5, before he jumped into the rest of chapter 5 and chapter 6, he says you have to know all the prate chiluka madreges, v'kol prate Seder Hishtalshelut dabiyalis b'nim b'hem asher eina muvadim lakol miklale atayres. And he says like this: v'yivu'ara kulam b'kuntras miyuchad. He's going to explain everything, all the points. But then he says, but wait a minute, he can't explain all the points. He says, min hatzarich mikol prat. I'm going to tell you what you need from every prat. And then he says, umimela yuven lamevim v'yadeh kama protam acherim.
Right.
In other words, I will give you the approximation, and the mela automatically you'll fill in the rest of the pratim. You'll see a circle.
Right.
I'll give you enough points as what you need.
Right.
And that's a thing of Bina, to give you the points, to give you the pratim.
Right.
And then the thing, if you notice later on in the book where he explains the inyanim of Chochmah and Bina, he says that the Chochmah is automatic.
Right. That's the thing.
Memela.
Right.
The Chochmah comes memela. In other words, you don't have to make an effort to fill in, to make it a circle. Or
right.
you don't have to make an effort to see the movie as a moving picture.
Right.
It's memela. And that's what he explains later also when the Mitzaref LaChochmah, that the Bina
right.
cuts up the idea into...
It dissects.
It dissects the idea into more and more and more until it finally has it into letters.
Right.
It cuts it down into concepts, and the concepts into smaller concepts of words, all the way into letters. And then it takes the letters and transfer them one at a time over. The mother loans the clothing to the daughter of speech.
Right.
And then, like what's happening now, I'm really talking one letter at a time.
Right.
If you see, if you make a study, a time study, you'll see that at no point did I say an actual word.
Right.
At no point in time.
Right.
A word takes several points of time.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
And same thing, if you look at the book, you'll see that in the book there's not a single word here.
Right.
There's a bunch of letters.
Right.
There's letters and there's spaces.
Right.
But when you listen to me or when you look at the book, you're Chochmah automatically. You don't have to make an effort. In other words, you don't have to make an effort. He said, wait a minute, he said ah, and then he said ooh, and then he said ba, and then he said boo. So
right.
that means something.
Automatically.
Right? You don't have to think like that. You don't have to think, oh, wait a minute, what word did he say?
Right.
If ba and boo, what does that mean? Babu. Oh, okay. But it happens automatically. And that's what he says here, Mimela. So the basic thing, it says, like, Ken ba'kodesh chazisicha, I have a chizoyin actually of you, and from this I get the chokhmah of the uzcha kvadecha, which that's already not really you. That's already the ois of you.
Right.
And the kovid of you.
Right.
Which the chokhmah is not into the you. Not really. The chokhmah is actually into the shame, into the light. And the bina, you say, what do you mean? But the bina never, at any point, the bina never gets the actual self. Says, yeah, it's a what? It gives you better and better approximations. But you say, okay, but that's still not the actual self. I mean, like the thing of the approximation, like for instance, the picture of the Rebbe is not the actual Rebbe.
Right.
You know. Okay, but
right.
the thing, like for instance, right now, I mean, what's happening is my voice is being turned into approximations in electric pulses, and then it gets over, and really what you're getting over there is you're not really getting exactly my voice.
Well, it's not even your voice at all, really.
Yeah, but even the thing that you're getting there is not really exactly how I talked over here.
Right.
It's an approximation.
Of course.
Okay, but it makes no difference. You're talking to me, and I'm talking to you.
Right.
The tzisa that you get is actually, it makes no difference, it's an approximation.
Right.
You know, so that's the whole thing. I mean, in Bina, so that is, the thing is, it's Nafka Bina that catches in the Etzem, and that's why also, like, you know, it's like you say, well, in various places it says that Bina is Tshuva Ilah.
Right.
So why would Bina be Tshuva Ilah? You'd think Tshuva Ilah is a guy would be crying and some kind of an emotion, you know?
Right.
Why Bina? This is why, because it says Tashuv hanefesh el havaya, was it? El Elokim asher, whatever, I can't remember it is, but it says that the inyan of Shuvah, that you have to return all the way to God.
Right.
Not part of the way. All the way.
Right.
And this is only possible with Bina. Because all the other ones are not 100%.
Right.
It's only by Bina, because now also the thing of Tshuva, there's two inyanim of Tshuva. One is to return all the way to the Eibishter. The other one, which is the main thing in Tshuva, is to realize how far away you are from the Eibishter.
Right.
And this is Dafka by Bina. Only in Bina does he realize really that he has absolutely nothing to do at all with the Eibishter. Nothing.
Right.
Totally nothing. That all the understandings and all the emotions and everything, it's all totally nothing. It has nothing to do with it.
Right.
Okay, so do you know where we are now?
We're on B'chol Zeh Turatz Inyan Nizkar Le'el B'simcha Shebina.
Where?
There's... Oh, you don't have that copy. Okay, 1, 2... It's like about the middle, right? A little bit more than the middle of the page on 226.
Oh, B'chol Zeh, yeah. So he says the Seder Madregas is Bina. The Bechia of Bina means that because he doesn't understand the explanation yet. Then the Bechia of Chochmah, because of the sense of hafla, of how far it is. And then finally the Bechia of Bina, because he sees that it's totally not understandable.
Right.
Not even the actual elokus, and not even in the actual or, but in the tzimtzum of the oir, shemesigai, aval asimcha shorsha megia be'atmus elokus dafka. Kmo haneshama shnei meziva shchina mamish began Eden. Gamas agosam bali de tzimtzum kayadua. They also, it's only through a tzimtzum. Vezeo v'yismach habach dafka. That's what it means, v'yismach habach dafka. Actually in the Atmos, v'haynu chedva b'sitra do, b'china ipucha, yetze mikoicha begimel mina madregas anal. Ubeis kovin shkulenham. These are exactly the exact two sides of the same thing. Beshovim mamish, exactly equal. Bezeu besimcha v'tuv levav merov koil, that you will worship the Eibishter besimcha v'tuv levav merov koil, from having so much of everything. V'asoges ha-mehave means the actual asaga, not of the mishave, but of the mahave. Is that what it says by you? Ha-mehave,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Means that the real thing, finally, the hasaga is not going to, even though the hasaga starts off to be into only the mishave, but finally you'll have a simcha v'tuv levav merov kol. You'll have everything. You'll have the whole thing. You'll have the hasaga ha-mehave, actually. Ikmo la'atid lovei, ikmo la'atid, iktiv ayin ba'ayin nir. You'll not see the Eibishter eye to eye. Ve'amar b'yeimahu, hine elokenu zeh. Right in front of us. This is this. Not koi, like this koi
right.
is like this, and there's actually this is the Eibishter. We'll be able to say mamish, the exact thing, l'neichach, right in front of us, and then v'az nagila v'nismecha boi dafka kiyado v'day l'maven.
Right.
Aval achshav kol zeh b'kel v'yetzel dea menagid hipuchi. Right now it's dafka to the opposite, dafka. Shahu ha'bechia misitra da. Hadroma Miles, Kmoshema Bebechi Yavoyu, Dafka. The basic thing, this is also like that the whole inyan of the Golus and the Geula. Also,
so 1 minute. What he's saying here is that even though the hasaga itself is the b'chinas tzimtzum or eloki, in other words, you don't really understand it, but what What you're sameach in is the atzmus.
Yeah, but it's more than that. He says finally the hasaga will be in the atzmus.
Finally, the hasaga will be in the atzmus, but
because it's a marshal on a marshal, and lahavin davar mitach davar. He will understand from the externality of the mahava. He will understand actually the hasaga into the mahava, not the mishava.
Right.
In other words, he'll climb up the levels in bina.
Mm-hmm.
That first of all, the simcha of bina, like what the simcha that we're getting in is we're not getting the simcha from understanding psychological concepts.
Right. The simcha is in God Himself.
The simcha, even right now, according to those hasagas mitzumtzamas,
right.
The simcha is still in the bach.
Right.
Makes no difference. That's the whole simcha that we're getting. We're not getting a simcha because, like right now, we're talking about the psychology of understanding.
Right.
How the human mind works. That's not where we're getting the simcha. We're not interested in that at all, actually.
Right.
The simcha that we're getting is because we are getting slowly filled in the chizayon of Elokus.
Right.
That's what we're getting the simcha from. And we're filling in one little detail, another little detail, and slowly we're starting to actually see a picture.
Right.
You know? But the simcha that we're getting, even when we're talking about the detail, is because of the Elokus in this, not because of the... in other words, we're getting the simcha from the nimshal, not from the mashal.
Right.
Like, for instance, like you say, oh, the light of the sun, you know, how the sun is like this fantastic explosion. So who cares?
Right.
That's not where we're getting the simcha from. Right?
Right.
Yeah, so, the basic thing, like, in other words, like, the thing with the geula and the golus and the geula,
right?
And the thing is that like also what did the Eibusher see to pick dafka idiots like us? Especially there's a thing that Bina is like from the highest things, and he picked up guys who really, you know, according to the levels of how they used to be, we don't really have no midos, and we don't have much of a seichel either.
Right.
So the thing is, why? Because, first of all, we don't have no midos to interfere with the bina, so we can't get any sense of accomplishment or enjoyment from anywhere else, only from the bina. And in the bina, like the thing of the bina is that the more that he doesn't understand, the more that he's connected to Elokus.
Right.
We don't understand better than any of the previous generations.
Yeah, we're pretty good at not understanding.
We're total idiots.
Right.
You know, I mean, we hardly, you know, so in a way, I mean, and not just us, the whole generation. You think, why didn't he pick the older generations? The generation, they could have understood this better. It's dafka because of that. Dafka because of that, because the sense of not understanding is the strongest by us, and we're the farthest away.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, this is basically, you know, the Indian that you know, of like Chuvay law and the whole thing of the Yechudim and the whole thing, everything is dafka from Bina. That Bina is the central, this. Yeah, so like I said, this is, you know, this particular chapter is really a fantastic chapter in terms of really pulling together the whole beginning of the book. That, you know, the whole thing is, in terms of the different avodas, is dafka bina, and for two reasons. One of the reasons is that even if you're going to choose another avoda, that avodah also depends on bina. And really, the avodah of love and fear, for instance, really the avodah of love and fear is also Hitbonenut.
Sure, because it's this Hitbonenut that awakens all the other faculties.
Yeah. So really,
that's really the main avodah, no matter which way you look at it.
Right. It's really the main avodah. So that even if you're going to say that you want to do an avodah of love and fear,
it has to be through the bina.
It has to be through the bina.
Love and fear without the bina.
Right. And even if you want to do an avodah of hafla'ah, it's also only through the bina. It means that the avodah, even of the other 9 avodas, is also bina.
Right.
But then there's the avodah of bina itself.
Right.
Which that's the other ones is called, in a way, like avodas halev, which is really not. Even avodas halev is really bina. But then in terms of avodas hamoichin, where it's just pure bina, like unconnected with the emotions altogether.
Right.
And even the avodah, the highest avodah, which is Dasus Havaya, the real thing of Dasus Havaya is Dafka Bina.
Right.
It's not Das. It's not an avodah of Das.
Right.
The Dasus Havaya, it's called Dasus Havaya because that's the result.
Right.
The result is Das. Like, what I told you, that I couldn't sleep because my mind was all fired up with this thing, so I couldn't remove the focus from it.
Right.
That's the result.
Right.
But the actual avodah is bina.
Right.
And the whole union of grasping dafka the atzmos, it's exactly the opposite of what people say. People think, you should, after all, the atzmos is totally non-understandable.
Right.
That's what people say. So that's right. You got it. The atzmos is totally non-understandable.
Right.
Not just because it's so hard to understand, but it's beyond understanding. That's right. So what the conclusion that they draw from it, and that's the main point of the Shaar HaYichud.
Right.
The main point of Shaar HaYichud, is in Bina, the Sag of the Sag.
Right.
Which is where you notice that Bina is also the source of the Klippus.
Right.
It's the source of the Shvira. And it's the source of the Tikkun, the 8th king of Tohu.
Right.
That the conclusion they drew from it is since Bina is not into the Atzmus at all, so therefore you should stay away from Bina and go to Das. Instead of eating Seder Hishtalshelut, he ate an Eitz Das.
Right.
And the thing is that it's exactly the upside-down conclusion. Because they don't get it. It's base kov and shkul in hand.
Right.
The fact that the Bina, more than any other sphera, is not into the Atzmos, that's what makes it that it has to do the most with the Atzmos. It sucks the Atzmos into it.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm going to have to say goodbye now.
All right.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, I started it.
Okay, so it says, La'atid k'tiv ayin b'ayin nireh v'amar b'yoyim ahu when Mashiach comes. Hinen l'kenu zel noichach az nagilav nismach aboy davka when Mashiach comes. Say it to Avadal Mavin. Aval achsha, but now kol zeh boker v'yitzeh al diyah menagid hipucha davka. Shehu abchiyah of the Golos. Misitra da. Ad ruma milas. Moshe nema b'bchiyah voyu davka. Haloch yelach uvacha,
Right.
Beken haloch yelach uvacha, gaimer. Ulatid lo v'yas choy. Like Moshe nema, az yimalas choyk pino. And this choyk is davka from the Atmos.
Right.
Of Moshe nema b'mokamacher b'inyan HaKanigya. The fight between the Shor Rabba and Rabbi Yossi.
That's what the kanigya is.
Kanigya means a joust.
A joust, okay.
Like the knights had a joust.
Right.
That's called a kanigya, that everybody sits and they watch a fight.
Right.
The kanigya is the fight between, it says that the Hebesher will amuse the tzaddikim through the Kanigya between Shor HaBar and Rabbi Yossi.
Right.
V'zeh shenemar ki ata avinu, in the future it'll be, we'll tell to Yitzchak that he's our father, Zeh Yitzchak, Yitzchak Zeh Bal Atit, Min HaMenaged Shaloi. Asher P'chinut HaPchia Haya Begolus Ki Yadua. And from the Pchia of the Golus will come the Tzchak of the Bias HaMashiach. וכל זה יובן טעם אמיתי לעניין תיקון חדש בבחייה דווקא, שהוא תועלת לנפש, ליאס, תפילה, גילוי, תיינוג, העצמי, כמו ביסמוך לבח וכאי גבנה, והגם שהבחייה בתיקון חדש הוא דמאוס פשוטים על חדש נורם.
Right.
And this, by the way, is these two chapters, as far as not so much as about the Bina, but the Pchia and the Chedva and the Dma'os and the Chatas Na'urim. It's expanded into a whole book, basically, in Derech Hayim.
Right.
Ukai Gavna, that the Dma'os Shutim al Chatas Na'urim is mamish the same thing as going towards the Atzmut. And he explains the reason for that is like when you get on the plane from Los Angeles to New York, and it's 3,000 miles, and the guy on the plane says we left Los Angeles and we've gone 1,000 miles away from Los Angeles.
Right.
So you ask him, and how much closer to New York are we than when we left? He'll tell you, idiot. I told you we're 1,000 miles farther from Los Angeles.
Right.
So we have to be 1,000 miles closer to New York.
Right.
It can't be any other way.
Correct.
You know.
Right.
If you're traveling along a certain line, so how far you left from where you're leaving, that's how close you got to where you're going.
Right.
So the same thing, how far you went away from the Chatas Na'urim, that's how close you're getting to the Eibusher.
Right.
Mamish the same thing. So that even though the B'chia is the most pshutim, it's just a plain crying on his Chatas Na'urim Kai Gavna, on the sins of his youth. Aval al ze amar hay salidim osi lechem yeiman balayla b'kriyas shema v'tfila d'shachrit v'abit, meaning that the dima of the Tugun Chatzos will be the lechem of the Yom and Valayla, means of the Kriya Shema of Arvis and Shachris. Shachris, Yomam is Shachris and Laila is Arvis.
Right.
Why? Mipnei shadmoet al arichuk shalom ha'avonis v'chatoim metaknim bechinat mokar avkam shahu davka prikas ol malchus shemayim. This is all covered in Derech Hayim in very great length.
Right, and also in Shari Uri talks about how the Dima is metakan the mokar apagam over there.
Yeah. Because the crying on the sin is actually about the reason of the sin, which is the prikat ol malchus shamayim. B'chinas galus hashchina uba b'derech prat b'kol nitzis eloki. This thing of the general Galus Hashchina comes in a particular way in each divine nitzos. There's a nitzos of the Shechina that's in Galus over there. V'adima azoi tzitakim v'tavir abgam legamre. K'to'er lemala b'chinas abchia shemenegit. Uba mikoyach hipuchis. And this comes from the opposite. Shuhu ached v'atzmis anal la'ir b'naf shalakit b'shir shma atfil achulu. And you notice now he's talking about Truvat Atah of Malchus.
Right.
Before he was talking about Tshuva Ilo'ah, but what he's telling you is even in Tshuva Tatov, just simply crying about the sins, also can bring him to Elokus, but it's nothing. But really, it's nothing like Tshuva Ilo'ah. So this crying of leaving the sins becomes mamish like an actual food for his soul. And exactly the opposite is the prekus oil, which is the opposite of crying. You know, the guy has prerequisite oil. What does it say? He thinks he's blessed. He says, nothing could happen to me. I will go in the mastery of my heart. I'll do whatever I feel like. And he walks around like a big shot.
Right.
When Eved is Moired and he's succeeding, or seemingly succeeding, so he's strutting around, you know. Shamrida prikus oil ikar moker lekol shiyas neged rotzen adam chulu. Okay, but still, Bina is a Tshuva Ilo'ah that totally includes this inside of it.
Right.
Because when he understands, in other words, especially like in nowadays, when a person, he doesn't even understand that he has a prikus oil. And he doesn't even understand how could he have a prikus oil, meaning that really, if he understood that really the master is standing right there.
Right.
And why doesn't he understand that? Because he doesn't have Hitbonenut.
Right.
So he doesn't know that. That's why he's misbarech. He thinks he's safe. In other words, he says, "I'm safe. I got away, and I can do whatever I want now."
Right.
The Avilim will leave the Derech Pisham to show him Elu Amrodim Beprikas Oil. A Pesha means a... I don't know how you say Pesha in English. How do you say Pesha in English? A Posheya. But whatever. A Pesha means that it's not just something that's done, but it's done in a way of a merit. A merit is a rebellion.
Right.
With a prikas oil that he's taken off the yoke. Gam she is anu ma'avonis and bechatas neurim. Even though the Avilim will, this by the way is explained at great length in Der Chaim. Even though that they will fast and they think that they're leaving the Pchinas Neurim, ma yo'il, what's going to help them? Why? Because they don't want to learn the Chassidus.
Right.
So what's it going to help them to beat their chest? Because this is the crying. The crying really comes from understanding what he did.
Right.
And this is the opposite of Einek. The crying is opposite of Einek, which will enliven his soul. They will come till the gates of death. The crying in Tikkun Chatzos, which the crying in Tikkun Chatzos is basically the crying on the Golus.
Right.
Which the crying on the Golus comes from the fact that he feels the lack, that the real crying on the Golus is that, like the Psak Halacha of the Rambam, that they didn't want Mashiach to come for all the goodies. That's not a real crying on the Golus. That's not an Indian of crying in Tikkun Chatzos.
Right.
The real crying is on being far away from the Eibusher.
Right.
That he was Pyrrhic oil. And so therefore now he doesn't have the ravacha to study properly. The Gimel, this is the hachana to the whole Inyan later on of the Gil Madregas, Piyam Sitra Da. In other words, this crying of tshuva is just the beginning. That's the tshuva tata.
Right. Okay, but none of this applies nowadays, this part.
It doesn't apply because we're doing Kathila River.
Right.
But
as far as even the Rebbe...
Kathila River, you have to know what you're jumping over.
Right. Right.
This is what you're jumping over. There's an Inyan of tshuva tata, of leaving the sins, and that does apply. It's not that it doesn't apply.
Right.
It really does apply. It's just that it's done without chiyah.
Right. Okay, but even according to the Rebbe, the bechiyah is just not on the sins, but you can still there's still a bechiyah on the galus.
Okay, but there doesn't have to be a bechiyah on the sins. No, the Rebbe said there shouldn't be a bechiyah on the galus anymore. Now we're ready to have the simcha on that Mashiach is already coming.
Okay.
That's what the Rebbe said. He said you don't have to do the bechiyah anymore. Now we're doing ready the simcha.
Right.
And also the bechiyah on the chatas na'urim is not necessary. You can just leave the chatas na'urim. And by the way, this is one of the reasons not to go against the shluchim, because they're preparing everybody for us. This is the first level.
Right.
These people have to put on tefillin and start keeping Shabbos. That's what he's saying. That the leaving the chatas na'urim is the hachana for these three levels of bechiyah. First, the bechiyah of bina, of that he doesn't understand the basic explanation in the first place, because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to go through.
Right.
And then the second bechiyah of Chokhmah, where he realizes how real far away the Eibishter is. And then the third bechiyah of Bina, when he understands that the thing is totally incomprehensible. But the hachana for that is the bechiyah and tikkun chatzis on the chatas na'urim, which gets him to leave the chatas na'urim. And right now, basically, it's very important that these shluchim, the shluchim all over the place, and they're getting people to do the first step of tshuva. So the same thing, I mean, the shluchim, in regards to the external world, they're basically saving it. Just they're bringing about this first level of the tshuva tata, which means basically to get people to start putting on tefillin and keeping Shabbos and eating kosher and learning Mishnayos,
right,
doing chitas and all this kind of business. Did I tell you about the guy from Singapore?
No.
I didn't tell you about the guy from Singapore.
No.
It's the Shluchim convention this weekend in New York. So I met an old friend of his from Yeshiva who is now the Shliach of Singapore. So this guy says to him, "Is your father here?" He thought, some people come and maybe I came for the Shluchim convention. So he said, "No, he's not. So what do you need him for?" So he said, "Oh, I have a gevir with me from Singapore who's in his cyber yeshiva. And he'd like to meet him. And apparently he's one of his gevirim because he came with him,
Mm-hmm.
So these guys, they're the guys who supply, like, for instance, you guys. I mean, the fact that there's because some shliach went out there and started the place, and now there's kosher food there and a synagogue for you. So it's very important. He says that's the hachana. The hachana for all these levels of going up is not like by the Hermetic Kabbalists that you can just study Kabbalah. We don't say like that. We say, no, you have to put on tefillin.
Right.
You have to put on tefillin and eat kosher.
Right, but even that, you can also go with Chatchila Ribber too.
Yeah, but
meaning
still,
like we tell the people
you
also.
start eating kosher, you can go look at Tchila Ribber, but a guy who's still not doing tshuva to eat kosher means that he's not really studying Chassidus.
Right.
And that's what he says the next thing. That's the next word he says. The im lo yatet atzmo. If not, he's fooling himself. If he's studying Chassidus and he's not putting on tefillin, he's fooling himself. And by the way, that's the whole reason why I'm getting so involved with the finding out what the mitzvahs menayach are. because by them also there's an Indian of studying because to have, they have two mitzvahs that have to do with Eibishter. But by them also, if they don't want to keep the 7 mitzvahs, also they're making toes.
Right.
Et asmo, be'echad me'ela, b'chia levad, v'ched v'levad. Either he'll have only crying, like some people only like to cry, but they're not happy about it, or just they're happy and there's no b'chia at all. Or she'enam lamitosin lo'imkan, or they're also not really true and deep. V'hara is a siman shelo nagal nafshei or elokid. The divine light really did not shine on his soul. Rak merochak ma'id. It's just very far from him. It just shone on him from very far away. More besides golos hashchina b'klalut neshamis Yisrael, like how the shchina is in the soul, but if it's in the soul, so how come if the shchina is mamish inside of you? So how come people can go and be whatever they are? Why? Because it's the light of the Shekhinah is in Golus and it shines on him from a very far away place. Bezeu ikar mokar asiba klolis lakol hanoiflim tomim mimadrigosam ba'einig v'chedva lakis bilti mitkaim es klal. The 1 minute they're flipped out with happiness or with crying, and then it's gone. Klal uklal b'ma'at moinim u'menagdim. With a little bit of mania and somebody going against it, you're not kochevli kashus miliba legamre, and then he's totally not tied to it anymore. Now, Mike, Moshenemar avilim ederach pisham. The geimer, kol oichel geimer. They don't want the food of Chachma. So zeh kol asher kivas elakim yachpas be'emes. Somebody really wants to be close to the Eibishter. Yase achon rabba benafshe tamid b'tikun chatzis b'inyan tchia misitra dachu lo anal v'lo yate et atzmei la'abed et nafshei b'chinam mamish v'day l'mevin. And he shouldn't fool himself to mamish lose his soul for nothing. And like we said, in our days, it's not anymore an Indian of Tikkun Chatzos, but there is an Indian of doing tshuva. And the basic thing here, like you say, so what's the siman? The siman is like this: if you don't see a tshuva tata'ah, it means there's no real tshuva law either. There's no such thing that a person should study Chassidus.
Right, and not be from or anything.
And not become frommer.
And not only that, if it doesn't make you frommer, then it's not Chassidus, what you're learning. That's what the
it might be Chassidus, but you didn't learn it properly.
The Friedrich Rebbe says if it doesn't make you frommer, it's not Chassidus.
It's Chassidus from the
Baldover.
From the Baldover.
Yeah.
Because it looks more sophisticated, So, that's the thing. In other words, if somebody's not... the Tikkun Chatzos is the P'chian Chatzos Na'urim, he's saying. So the way we apply it now is like this. In other words, the Tikkun Chatzos is the most external level of tshuva.
Right.
And like now the Rebbe said that the tshuva and everything is not done in a way of P'chiya anymore. That was only till the days of the Friedrich Rebbe, which the Friedrich Rebbe's motto was La'alta L'tshuva, La'alta L'gula. And the Rebbe said that in our days it's La'alta L'gula. So
right.
Did you say so? But wait a minute, doesn't that totally disagree with what he's saying here, that this chedva without crying? I says no, because he just told you that the crying was in Golus. We did the crying. We already did the crying. Now we're ready for the happiness.
Right.
And the thing is that it's not that the crying is not there. The same thing like during the Golus, the happiness was also there, except that the crying was open, And the chedra was hidden. And now it's the other way around. That the chedra is open and the crying is hidden. But the thing of tikkun chatzos is the thing of to fix up the chatzos neurim. The basic level of tshuva, that if you don't see this basic level of tshuva in a person, then he's not really studying Chassidus.
Right.
And that was the thing. I got a letter from this guy in Toronto, a Lubavitch apparently. His father is getting mixed up with these people called Bnei Baruch.
Right.
They're a close sister group of the Berg people. They're also Ashwagians, you know.
Right.
And basically, I looked through their stuff. They're total heretics. So he says he's wondering what's happening because it looks like his father is becoming more and more lax with the mitzvahs. So that's the sign. He's telling you here, that's the sign. He's becoming lax with the mitzvahs. It means it's not real Kabbalah or Chassidus.
Right.
Because you can't say, oh, but I'm doing Kabbalah, I'm doing Tshuva Elah. So if you're doing Tshuva Elah, the Tshuva Tatah is automatically included.
Right.
And there should be an automatic improvement in your level of doing the mitzvahs. Because the Yuvan Gamkin Ikar Atam Le'inyan Aklal Gadol V'Shem Harav Magizal. What does it say here? It's kind of unclear. What does it say?
Mashakat Tuva Tivi'it. Or Tivi'im might be.
Hold on, I'm going to flip the tape.
I would say it must be the thing, like from what you read after. In other words, the b'chia tivis. That the simple crying, what he said before, like he said before.
So it's the b'chia tivis.
What did he say before? What did he say before on the? There's no pshutim al chatzos neurim. Is there a footnote over there?
Hold on.
No, there's not.
No. Okay. So kli achon lo enega amiti b'mesiras nefesh be'echad. So kli achon lo enega amiti b'mesiras nefesh be'echad. The Kabbalah is called raz and chuluk moshim v'or bekuntis ba'arichos v'dayla maven. That the basic thing is like this. That the basic point here, if you take the basic point of the thing, the end part just is saying that the Tshuvat HaTorah is a necessary kli for achana to get into learning the deeper Chassidus. And according to the Shita of the Mittler Rebbe, you couldn't really understand the Chassidus properly unless you had a big achana.
Right.
With crying and stuff like that.
Right.
Which the Rebbe says now is different. The Rebbe told us, first of all, the Rebbe Marash said L'Katchila Ribber, and the Rebbe said two L'Katchila Ribbers. He said L'Katchila Ribber on his L'Katchila Ribber.
Right.
In other words, he said to start living like Mashiach.
Here, I'll look up the... he brings over here, there is a footnote on the B'mashakos of Rav Magidzal.
Yeah.
And my mom can trace him. If
Right.
you want to look it up, hold on. You want me to look it up?
It doesn't have to be this minute.
Okay, so I'll look it up after.
Yeah. So the basic thing, like to recap the chapter, is the real thing is not like it seems at the end that he's backing off from what he said at the beginning. He was saying that Bina is the main thing.
Right.
And later on, it seems like it switched over to the Avodah of Malchus.
Right.
Which is he switched away from Tshuva Ilo to Tshuva Tata'ah.
Right.
Except that if you notice, he said, well, this is the hachana for that, what I said before.
Right.
He said, that's what I said before, but if you're not doing the mitzvahs, then you're not doing nothing. It all goes together with being from.
Right.
And if you're not from, so you have to start doing that along with that. Otherwise, this whole thing is not going to work, basically, he's saying.
Right.
And what Shimon said about what the Rebbe said, that now it's like a Tila River, that's basically because now everybody's a Tinok Shenishba.
Right.
So they don't really have a Chatas Norim. That's why it can work.
Right.
It's not, you can't be a Merida, a Moirid B'Malchus, and at the same time do a Tshuva Ilo and say, hey, Kingo, baby, let's dance together.
Right.
What are you talking about? You're a Moirid B'Malchus. I'm going to hang you.
Right.
I'm not going to, you can't dance together with me. You're a Moirid. A Moirid is a Moirid. Prikas oil. So now the thing is that they're not Moirdim.
Right.
And there's various reasons what the Rebbe gave, and also because the Priya was already done, the whole Golus was already done. He said that since what happened, and especially in the Second World War and things like that,
right,
the Jews already had such a Priya that is already time for the Simcha.
Right.
So that's the basic inyan here, and it's not that the Rebbe is disagreeing with this. It's just he adjusted it for our days.
Right.
And basically, we know from our own experience that you can do L'Katchila Rebbe, and you can go straight to Dasas Havaya, which the Rebbe says to start living like Mashiach, which means to go straight to Dasas Havaya. Like it says, in the time of Mashiach, the only thing that everybody will do is Dasas Havaya.
Right. Right.
So what he's saying, he was saying the whole beginning of the chapter was on Bina, the Indian of Tshuva Ilah, and at the end he said, but there's no such thing as Tshuva Ilah without Tshuva Tata'ah first.
Right.
Okay, that was till the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash said like a Tila Rebbe, means forget the Tshuva Tata'ah and go straight to the Tshuva Ilah.
Right.
And the Rebbe said even farther than that. He said, really, forget even the Tshuva Ilah, and we're going to Pnimius Bina.
Right.
Not even just Bina, but Pnimius Bina into the actual Atzmos.
Right.
And that's chapter 6.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
You want to go into chapter 7?
No, we're going to stop here.